Okay, welcome to the, put our microphones on. Welcome to the CCWD regular board meeting of Wednesday, November 14th. It's 1 p.m. I did hear from Director Thomas. He will be about 5 minutes late, but we have a quorum. We're going to go ahead and start. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I ran into a tree while doing some blowing the yard out. Thanks for
That was painful.
It was. Rebecca, can you take roll, please?
Director Smith?
Here.
Director Underhill?
Here.
Director Herman?
Here.
And Director Davidson is absent, and Russ will be here.
We've heard from Russ. He should be about 5 minutes late. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comment today? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. We have 4 items on the agenda. 3A, approval of minutes for the board meeting of September 12th and September 19th. Review Board of Directors monthly timesheet for October 2018. And ratify claim summary, secretarial fund in amount of $1,746,510.38. And adopt a resolution recognizing Tim Quinn for serving as the executive director of Aqua, Associated California Water Agencies.
I'd like to pull the claim summary.
Okay, we're going to pull item 3C.
I'd like to make a motion, we accept 3A, B, and D.
Okay, we have a motion for accepting of 3A, 3B, and 3D. Looking for a second.
Second?
Okay, so we have a motion to approve item 3A, 3B, and 3D. And we have a second. Rebecca, will you take roll call?
Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
President Bennett?
Yes. Okay, we're going to take on 3C at this time. Bertha, go ahead.
Okay. I just, in reviewing it, of course, I understand about the expenditures that are already predetermined, but so I was looking at the other ones, and one of the things that I thought was very interesting was the fact that the Aqua membership is $13,000 less than the Upper McCollum River, and I never really paid attention to that before.
Now, Bertha, where is that?
Aqua is 2019 membership dues. This is on page 1, and it's $23,535, and that's for the 2019 membership. Then we flip over to page number 7, and the Upper McCollum River Association membership renewal from October 18th to September 19th is $36,768. And of course, I think I know that Aqua's membership is based upon our budget. Is that?
It is, however, there are some little bit of circumstances surrounding the UMRA bill that makes it higher this year. Generally, it's in the $18,000 to $19,000 range. However, this year they are doing a plan update, which required UMRA to go out and use a consultant to help manage the process. So there are those costs of updating the project plans and so forth. That's why you see the additional cost for this year.
Mm-hmm. And so that'll be this one time only
Correct. It'll drop down next year.
to 18 or 19?
19,000 in that general ballpark,
Okay.
yes. And just as a footnote on UMRA, the biggest contributor to UMRA is still East Bay Mud.
Right. And we can't compete and we don't want to. Okay. The next question I have is on page number 6. For O'Connell and Dempsey, I haven't seen a status coming through lately, because we used to have a monthly status that Mia used to send. We get them?
That's, with the transition, that's something I overlooked. We will make sure that we forward to you those reports as soon as they come in.
Yeah, no problem. That's
Okay.
okay. That's fine. The next one is 130916, check number for R.E. Smith, and this was for the Jenny Lynn water treatment. And should he not be on the, get a designation of A through F, that's like the rest of them?
Yes, that was an oversight there.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because that is a project that we are getting reimbursed for in part through the Cal OES and FEMA money.
Okay, fine.
Very good catch.
Okay.
Are
That's
there any
all I
other
have.
questions?
I have one, and I apologize for being late, but I was blocked by a train coming from
Oh,
Stockton.
that's not,
It could happen.
It could happen, yeah. No, I had to attend the groundwater recharge meeting in Stockton. So, can you tell me what is a Polaris Ranger for $28,000 Polaris Ranger? What?
It's like a little quad runner thing.
What page are you on? I
Page-
think I know what it
page-
is, but I just want to,
2 of 8.
2 of 8. What we have there is basically a small snowcat
Okay.
to be able to go up into in the past, to get up to our tanks and our pumps in times of heavy snows.
I was just wondering if it might be available on the weekends.
No, sir.
we'll rent it out, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I have.
Certainly.
Because
That's
that is a very necessary thing,
Oh, yeah.
because the fellas have to put on their snowshoes.
Yes, they
and
do.
walk up to our tank. And, I mean, those, I think it's like a mile up to the tank, and I see someone,
Yeah.
yeah.
We
so-
have had a snowcat in the past be able to do that, but we bought a used snowcat, and it's finally seen the end
Oh,
of its
okay.
useful life.
Okay.
So we had to replace it.
Okay.
That's the only question I have.
Cost us $1,080 to recruit for a director of operations?
Yes, sir.
Money well worth it.
That's what I hear, money well spent.
Yes.
Okay, we're looking for some action on 3C.
I move to approve the claim summary.
A second?
Rebecca, will you take roll?
Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes?
Director Underhill?
Yes.
President Rademacher?
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, new business. Before we go any further on the agenda, I do want to make a change or correction to the agenda under item 9, next board meetings, the Thursday, November 15th, and Tuesday, November 20th meetings have been canceled, as was the special meeting that was originally scheduled for yesterday, the 13th. We do have, those meetings have been rescheduled in December to have to our next regular meeting, as when we get to this item, will be on the 12th, our regular board meeting, and then we're going to have those 2 special meetings that were originally scheduled for this month. They've been punted to December, and they'll be on the December 13th and 14th. 1 p.m. will be special board meetings here at the office.
Okay.
With that, we're going to move on to item 4A, discussion direction regarding funding options for district's PERS unfunded pension liability. Jeff Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This topic is a continuation of previous conversations we've had with your board, specifically when we provided you the PERS PERS valuation for June 30th, 2017, talking about specifically the unfunded accrued liability, or UAL. We also brought this to your Finance Committee for discussion, and the Finance Committee recommended staff bring it to the full board for discussion. Today, we have Eric Scriven of NHA Advisors to help show you different options to be able to, how to address our UAL and to look at possible restructuring. Eric is no stranger to this district. He's been involved in previous fundings back in 2004, one of the bond refinances, and has been involved in public agency financing for many, many years. So with that, I'm going to have Eric come up here, provide you a presentation, some little education, and we'll both be available for comments.
Good afternoon, Mr. Board President and members of the board. I read the staff report, and the staff report really was concisely written, well done. There's just a little bit more color and maybe some deeper detail. I don't know, you can have me drill down every bullet, or you can stop me and we can get to the color graphs and really get to the heart of it. But I'll take your direction on that, but my plan is to go through everything, every bullet pretty much, kind of essentially what the staff report said, and have it on the record. So, as you know, the district makes two types of payments each year. One is what is called the normal cost, which is the annual cost for the benefits for current employees. And then there's the unfunded liability, the UAL. That payment, there's a portion of the payment is to repay that debt. And UAL is what is in the bank, if you will, with CalPERS versus what the actuaries say is going to be owed, the present value of what's going to be owed over the next 20, 30, 40 years for retiree benefits. And you all know the UAL, CalPERS, is in the final stages of lowering the discount rate from, I think it'll be at 7% in the next year or so. So they use that 7% as their amortization rate. So as we all know, the costs have been going up over the past several years, more than several years. They've gone up significantly. A lot of that has to do with poor investment, reinvestment performance, but also there's been numerous assumption changes. Like I just mentioned, that discount change going from 8.25 back into, like 15 years ago, it's all the way down to 7, I think 7.25 now, and the idea is it's going to go to 7% in the next year, which has a dramatic effect, in some cases doubling the UAL. There have been other assumption changes, like the actuaries building in folks living longer and collecting their retirement benefits. So those have increased the UAL as well. So the bottom line for the district is, as you know, the UAL, the unfunded liability on the city's books per CalPERS, has gone from $6 million to 10, in recent past, to $10 million, and depending on what happens in the future, it could still be going up. So this is where we get into some color charts, and it kind of distinguishes between your two types of payments. You have the red, which is your normal cost paying for current employees, and that is not as volatile and is projected to stabilize in the next several years to a relatively flat payment shape, which is important to remember. That's what you're budgeting for every year. And then you have the blue, which is the unfunded actuarial liability, your debt to CalPERS. And that payment or repayment shape is, what's the word? I want to use the word weird. But it's accelerating and increasing at a faster rate. And what happens is you've got a $1 million total payment now, and that payment over time is going to grow $500,000 in the next several years in 2021 based on current projections. This is the total payment, not just the UAL. And then it's going to get to $2 million from the current $1 million in about 18 years. So that's, it's a very, and this is very typical across the state, cities, and special districts at CalPERS, and it all relates to the way they have changed assumptions on amortizations and how they've layered on bad investment performance and some of the rules and policy changes they've put in place more recently where they're trying to amortize things faster because they've got a bit of a problem. They need to get more money into the system in the near term. So, are there any questions so far? Okay. So the district can continue on and pay that payment shape, which is accelerating and increasing greatly, and it's really mostly, if not all, the UAL repayment, not really the normal cost repayment. So the district can continue to do that, and nothing says you can't, but it's a difficult. You have to find more and more money for that, and it's a difficult budget issue, tough to budget for those fast increases of $500,000 that you're going to need to find in the next several years for that payment. So there are some options that you can do to what I would characterize as restructure that unfunded liability portion of the payment, the debt that you have with CalPERS. You have two primary options to restructure and essentially refinance, but I always use the term restructure. There is one program that's offered by CalPERS. It's a Fresh Start. They call it the Fresh Start program. It's in the annual report that they provide. They'll give you those numbers. So we're using those numbers from the district's report, CalPERS report. And what they'll do, they'll allow you to restructure and create a smoother, if you will, repayment shape for the unfunded liability. The problem with what they provide, they allow you to do is they'll have you use their discount rate, which is 7%. Essentially, that's the rate that you're paying on that restructured Fresh Start type of debt. They also have a requirement that they're going to only go out 10 or 15 years. They're not going to allow you to restructure that debt any longer than that, which, as we'll see in the next several pages, has an impact. In fact, we say it right here, the near-term payments, if you restructure and try to smooth that payment using the Fresh Start, whether it's 10 or 15-year amortization period, is much higher now and pretty much every year through the next 10, 15 years. The benefit is you're done at 10 or 15 years, but it's a much higher payment in that 10 and 15-year period. Or you can use, instead of using CalPERS's program, the Fresh Start program, you can use outside funding sources, whether it's a bank loan or a bond, and you can do the same thing. You can restructure your loan. You have a lot more flexibility with a restructuring using a loan or a bond. There's a multitude of refinancing or restructuring solutions to fit that new debt so that the overall debt with the normal cost and the UAL restructuring, and for that matter, all of the other debt that the district has, fits into a more predictable overall fixed debt payment for the district. So I'm going to read these bullets. You can refinance any portion of the UAL that you care to. The interest rate, we've used conservative assumptions, is going to be lower based on the district's credit rating than what CalPERS charges, which is the 7%. There's two types of loan programs. You can do a private placement with the bank, which is typically a shorter term loan. They don't like loans that are much longer than 15, 18 years. It has to have an average life of under 10 years. Or you can do a public offering, which is a bond essentially. Those, you can go out to 30 years with those types of financing instruments, but they do have a higher cost of issuance. And the assumptions that we're using in the subsequent pages, we assume that the pledge, the security, is a net revenue pledge, which is the same type of pledge you have, I believe, Jeff, on all of the other debt, or do you have some leases too, right?
We utilize, for our other debt, we reference all revenues available to the district, whether it's rate revenue, property tax, and such. It gives us much better latitude. So we
It's
pledge.
a stronger credit.
It's a stronger credit, so that's the way our bond council
And you
wrote
don't
it.
have to pledge assets either.
Correct. We do not pledge assets, we pledge revenues.
So that's the assumptions we're using, which I feel pretty comfortable that you're A+ type of credit rating. So, what page is this? Did I skip a page?
No? Nope, that's it.
I think I've mentioned a few of these things already, but the loan and bond restructuring, the considerations are that I don't believe you do anything of this sort if you're not restructuring to gain budget predictability from a new sort of smoother overall repayment, inclusive of your normal costs and your UAL repayment. You don't want the same payment shape. The whole objective is to have a smoother, more predictable shape. Interest rates for a private placement or a public offering are going to be lower than the 7%. So there are savings that are going to be achieved in the near term and over the length of the new loan versus what you're repaying.
CalPERS is basically acting as a loan shark.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I mean, that's the bottom line.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
7% should be easy to beat in this market on private loans.
I would hope so.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's correct. They have a longer time horizon, but there's a variety of reasons why they have it it had been as high as 8.25, you know, so.
Huh. What do you know about that? Guido's, one of the CEOs too. Okay, I'll shut up.
So there are savings, financial savings on a cash flow basis and a present value basis, which are some of the metrics that you want to look at to make sure that you're doing a good deal. You don't want to, because the fresh start, even though it's got a shorter amortization, if you're not really sort of apples to apples saving money on the interest rate, then you have to question whether it's a good idea, notwithstanding the fact that you're trying to meet a business objective, which is budget predictability.
Right.
So, and I guess the last point is you increase the funded status of the retirement plans. One thing that I would note, Jeff, and the board, to the board, is that we would never recommend that you take out 100% of your UAL. You don't want to be at 100%. I think you're at 60% 70 right now. There's a nice sweet spot in the 85 to 90% area. At 100%, if they have a couple of really good years, and then your assets are higher than what the liability is over the retirees' lives, you don't get any benefit from being what they call super funded. You're basically giving them too much money, so it's always healthy to have a little bit of an unfunded percentage, but rule of thumb is 85, 90% is a good place to be. You've got some cushion so that you're not giving CalPERS too much money. So there are some risks and consideration, and I guess the main point is if you do an outside financing where you're raising money and giving it to CalPERS to repay a portion or most of your UAL, and that new financing that you're doing, you structure that bond or that bank loan so that it meshes with whatever's outstanding, so that you've got an overall level or close to level payments shape, which is what you're looking for. You're raising money and you're giving a lump sum to CalPERS. So if there's a bad year in the next year, that you give them that lump sum versus giving them little payments over a bunch of years. If you give them a lump sum, they have a bad year, that's going to magnify. You're going to have a magnified investment loss because of that. It won't change the fact that you leveled out your payment shape, but your increase there is a risk, and we call that market risk, by giving CalPERS a lump sum in like year one if they have a bad year in year one or year two. So that's one of the key risks that we always want to make sure elected officials are aware of, and staff. PV savings are not guaranteed. PV savings, present value savings, will be generated if CalPERS earns more than the bond and loan rate, which they've had years recently that they've earned 12, 13%, and they've had years where they've earned 3% in the last 5 years. We estimate that the bond rate or the bank rate would be around 4.5% to 5.5%. So there's no guarantee that you're going to overall get the savings, but in the long term, CalPERS is saying that they believe they can earn 7%, and if you're at a lower amount, we can project that there is present value savings, but it's not guaranteed. So one thing is, you have a loan on your books. It's the CalPERS loan, this unfunded liability. Some people call that as soft debt. And when you enter into a contract to repay investors or a bank, that's hard debt. That's going to be on your balance sheet. I would suggest that CalPERS feels that their debt with the district's debt with CalPERS is a hard debt too, but we always put that on the table. There is a distinction between your debt with CalPERS versus entering in a contract with a bank or investors through a bond issue.
Explain that further. What is the soft versus hard, and why?
Well,
Why does CalPERS look at it as a hard debt and we on the other side?
a lot of folks say, okay, CalPERS, from a borrower's point of view, the district's point of view, CalPERS is presented on your balance sheet differently. It's in the long-term liabilities, but it's in its own section versus your long-term debt, if you will, bank loans and bond issues. That clearly, those are contracts, and that is considered in the industry as hard debt.
Are the consequences the same if you don't
It
repay
truly
the
is.
debt? Okay.
It is, but we always we want to make sure that we raise that issue. It's a distinction, but I would actually say that CalPERS debt may be even the hardest debt of all.
Okay.
They're not going away.
All right.
But we just want to make sure we put everything on in front of you so you can think about it. In this case, we're talking about a net revenue pledge, but in some instances, The security for this type of a transaction is a lease where you have collateral, a leased asset. That's not the case in this instance, but that is an option if you have sufficient assets. But the credit of a net revenue pledge is better than a lease credit. So you're in a better position to get lower interest rates because of the security that we see is the most viable here. What is that? Oh, the last one. If you're using a net revenue pledge, it can dilute. You have more debt because typically bond investors and credit rating agencies, they should, but they don't look at your CalPERS unfunded liability payment in the debt coverage ratios. So I guess that's one of the distinctions between hard and soft. This would become a hard debt and it would go into your debt service coverage ratios. So you have to manage that to make sure you keep the credit profile of the district strong. Any questions? We're going through all the risks. I want to make sure it's all out there. So this is the fresh start. Now we've peeled out this next chart, which is only blue, is your UAL repayment. We took out the normal cost, which was red in that earlier chart. And you can really see that the UAL repayment is increasing rapidly and very uneven because it drops off in 2037. So this shows you what we had talked about as far as the fresh start with CalPERS, the 10-year and the 15-year. They use the 7%. I believe we used the full $10 million. Yeah, the full $10 million that is your unfunded liability right now. And this compares what you have right now with the smoother repayment under the fresh start, under a 10-year and a 15-year. As you can see, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to save money by doing a fresh start, but it's all on the back end. You're going to pay much more during the time that the term of whether it's a 10 or 15-year loan. So it does smooth things out, but I would submit that it doesn't really solve the business objectives that you're seeking. And the last point is fresh start payments are locked in, and once you do that, you can't go back. For some reason, this is cutting things off. So a loan or a bond option, I'd like to, the distinction between a private placement, which is a bank loan, versus a public offering, which is a bond, really the main difference is the banks will not lend out past a certain period of time. So we're using about a 19-year term, 2037 for the private placement. That's the red line. And then there's two public offerings, two bonds. One is a 15-year, no, that would be a 2044. That is 26 years, and then the blue line is a 30-year transaction out to 2048, I believe. What you can see here is that, and showing you two scenarios. One is sort of not taking out the full 10 million. It's just taking out a portion, about 5.7 million. There's a myriad of amounts and ways you can reshape this. We just wanted to show two amounts, the 5.7 million and the full amount, and then show three scenarios: a private placement, and then a bond at a 26-year term and a 30-year term, so that you could sort of see and understand what really is happening. The more and we'll get to it to the next page, but the shorter your term on the refinancing, as you saw on the Fresh Start, the shorter the term, that happened to have a higher interest rate, but the shorter the term, the higher your payments are going to be, of course. You have a shorter time period to pay them off. So the private placement, you can get a flat red line, as you see, and chop off the hump of the current UAL repayments in the gray. That's the top line on the gray. But if you go out longer with a public offering, a bond, it goes down now and into the future. And then if you go out to 30 years, the blue line, it goes down even further. So, do you have any questions on this? There's a lot of information in here. We want to just try to provide kind of a high-level sort of view of what you're trying to achieve, which is a more predictable repayment shape for your unfunded liability repayment. And
Eric, could you explain the present value, the PV savings in the Fresh Start program? There's no PV savings at all, but in each of these bond or loan, there's very significant PV savings.
It's because the Fresh Start, you're using the same interest rate as what you're paying now. CalPERS is letting you restructure your repayment, but they're using the same interest rate. So there's no PV savings. There may be cash flow savings, but it's all on the back end.
Okay.
But you had more payment that you had to pay in the front end. So that net negates it mathematically.
Okay, thank you.
When I look at this, perhaps I'll go back, I'll go to the next page, the 10 million. You can hold that thought as where these numbers are. Your payment is the red. The private placement is at about, what is that payment? It's about 900,000 out for 19 years. And then you're closer to 800,000 or slightly under 800,000 for 26 or 30 years. So that's with taking out 5.7 million of your UAL. So you go to option 2, and we're just trying to bracket things so you can understand sort of the edges of where you can go with this. If you do the whole thing, which we would not recommend, but if you do the whole thing, using the same term for the private placement, and I think those terms are a little different. The intermediate bond is 22 years, and then the blue line is a 30-year loan. As you can see, the same sort of relationships hold. The private placement is higher but shorter, and you get savings. And then as you lengthen the term for the bond issues, you go down, but you go out longer. And the blue line, you go down further, you're around 700,000 versus the previous example on the previous page, which is about 800,000. What this shows you is that the more you take out, the more of your unfunded liability you take out, using either a private placement or a bond, you're going to be able to restructure your overall repayment down further, because you're going to gain more savings because of the interest rate and the ability to change things around.
You've shown us a $5.7 million loan and then a $10.3 million loan, which you've said we don't want to do at the 100%.
Right, we just wanted to bracket it for you.
Is there an optimal number between there that shows the best savings somewhere between those two numbers?
I think there is, but there's a multitude and myriad of options, and I mean, you may want to not have a completely flat line. We may want to, in year 1, have that be what you basically budgeted, so we can lower that, which would just slightly increase everything. Or we can have everything go up like 1% a year over the next 15 or 20 years or 30 years, whatever you think is the optimal repayment shape, if you will, that's predictable and works for the budget. You may want to integrate outstanding debt that you have. This is, in my mind, this is all about rate management. You want to make sure you don't have these humps that are forcing the board's hands to increase rates for something that in the future is actually going to go down.
So this number that we choose is going to have a lot to do. We know that our rates are going up periodically, so we probably could have a little bit larger payment go up in this, but will there be other expenses that come and payoffs that come in certain years that we'd, and our objective here isn't to make a decision, but to provide, go ahead.
Direction, correct. We're not making a decision here today. One of the things that I want to point your board to is I made a mistake of providing you the wrong handout in the staff report. It was for June 30th, 2016. I think Rebecca gave you the handout for June 30th, 2017, correct? And if you would go to page 9 of that handout, and this is, it's called Scheduled Plans Amortization Basis. Eric and I have had this conversation with, and also with Mike Meyer, his associate. When PERS looks at past performance, they identify basically wins and losses. Did they meet their expectations, exceed it, or did they miss their expectations? And you can see over the years that they have a number of different bases that go into the amount of what is owed, the $10.2 million over on the far right-hand corner. Each of those bases can be part of the financing restructuring plan. You want to look at the bases that are going to save you the most amount of money by paying them off. You have you could be in the ramp up stage, the ramp down stage, how the actuaries look at this. So part of this process, if we move forward, is to analyze the basis and find out what's the best ones to pay off now. Some of them you may not want to pay off because it's not going to save you any money. As Eric said, also you want to take a look at what our existing debt is, what our 5-year financial forecast shows us for revenues to available to pay this off. So you're looking at a number of different variables to choose the right amount. And that's what this next step will be. And we have some debt that's coming off the board next spring, which is the PERS side fund loan. That's coming off. We have the capital R&R loan that's coming off in several years. So you want to take a look at your existing debt, make sure you layer it correctly, and in some of these instances, like we've done with the R&R, you could have less of a principal payment early on if you take off the loan, and then kind of have it more back-ended. So what we create is as much of a level playing field as possible for what our costs are.
Right.
We're going to have to
In the
pay.
aggregate.
Yeah, we're going to have to pay this PERS regardless. It's just the predictability. And I want to take you to one more page, and that is just page number 12, the very last page. And this really looks at how the district's UAL has changed over the years. The first one you look under employer contribution history, starting with fiscal year 16-17. The unfunded liability was $382,000 and change. For 19-20, it's going to be $682,000. That's a significant increase. That's what makes it difficult to budget for, because they only give you predictable numbers out a couple years. You don't, the rest of it is just projections. So as you look at the costs going out over time, it makes it very difficult to budget in a way that provides predictability of expenses. The last thing we want to do is have a spike in expenses, especially in PERS costs, which it's unaccounted for, and then you have to look at, well, we got to chop expenses somewhere else because we have limited revenue. And that's kind of the thought process we've had, is to create predictability, to find savings, interest savings, which is going to be less than the 7% they provide us, and look at different options. And that's kind of where we're going to be going to the next level. But these few pages in here provide you really good insight as to what PERS charges us and what our funding ratios are too.
You referred to 30-year loans,
30-year bond issue.
bond issue.
Yes.
And I only see the 10, 13, and 17 and a half versus a 10, 15, and 19. So maybe I'm not seeing something here.
Look in the box on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
We're on page 9, right?
Right?
The second line, you have interest rate, 5.16, 5.13,
Right.
5.19. The next one is final term.
Right.
2036, that's about 18 years from now for the private placement.
Okay.
And the next one is 2040, that's 22 years. 2047, that's 29 years, it's not 30.
So the average life of the loan is different than what you're saying?
That's correct. You know, you have, say, a 19-year final term loan, but the average life, how the banks and investors look at it, is usually a little bit more than half. It depends on where all your amortization occurs, if it's early
Right.
or late in the loan. That's how they'll price that loan, you know,
Okay.
as far as
So
interest rates.
It's kind of the principle then?
It is, yeah, because,
Yeah.
I mean, if I leave you with nothing else, this is a potential tool that you can reshape the debt. There's a myriad of options. You want to be comprehensive about everything else you're looking at as far as your existing debt, your capital plans,
Right.
what have you, so that this fits within the overall budget predictability and budget plan that you have over the next several and many years. So that, we can go through the last couple of pages, it's kind of the summary. If there's more questions, I'm glad to take them. But Fresh Start is out there. It's a good program, especially if you have a lot of money, and it creates some predictability, but there's no real interest rate savings, and it creates a higher near-term payment schedule that for many public agencies is tough to take. The restructuring gives you the predictability, and it's anticipated, strongly anticipated, you're gonna get savings, but you just never know how CalPERS is gonna perform when you give them $5 or $8 million. So that's important to always keep that in mind, that, but even if they don't do well, you have restructured your repayment to the business need, which is a more level payment structure. And in general, the more you take out of the unfunded liability debt, and the longer you go, the more ability you have to restructure the overall new repayment shape. The less you do or the shorter you go, there's less ability to restructure. But the private placement option is 15 to 18-year term, so that's a limiting factor. But private placements are a lower cost of type of financing. You have lower financing costs versus a public bond where you have disclosure to investors and things of that nature. So we're hoping to take any questions. There's been a lot of good questions, and get feedback, and we're here at the pleasure of the board, and we'll help in any way we can.
I just have an observation, and it may be an incorrect memory, but 10 years ago, 11 years ago, PERS was in such, the paragon of investment strategies, and had all these billions of dollars and everything, and they were victimized, like all of us were in an economic downturn, but they had some bad management. If we go through all this machinations to kind of identify our savings over a period of 15 years, and we have another debacle like we experienced
Right.
10 years ago, doesn't this all go out the window again?
That's, if they have a problem like they had 10 plus years ago, everyone in the state, whether you do this or you don't do this, your unfunded liability is going to go up, just because they've had bad performance. This, giving them, if this debacle happened next year after you gave them $5 million, that would be magnified somewhat for the district, but your unfunded would have gone up. One thing that won't change, though, is if you've restructured your debt, you've sort of taken pieces and tried to fill in the low points and cut off the hump that we've been showing to flatten it out, that's not going to change. Your restructuring strategy will not be defeated if there's a bad market. The thing is, the payment, that level payment, will go up, though. I mean, it will go up or it'll go down depending on how their performance is, which is what happens now. But you've got a hump currently that's going up or down. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but we've recently gone through budget processes and look for savings on the operations activities here, trying to save every penny. What does a district do if you just simply can't increase the amount of money that you're paying in next year or the following year?
They don't have a sense of humor about those types of things.
Guido shows up with a bat, breaks your kneecaps.
No. I mean, so that, seeking this refinancing and all that stuff, I mean, it shows in your graphs that for the next couple of years, we'll be paying at a rate that's lower or equal to any of the options that we would be.
Yeah, no, we can change though. This is just for, there's a myriad of options, and one flaw in these analysis, we just wanted to show you a straight line, but you can make the first couple of years fit, or even for year 1, year 3, you can
Okay.
step it to exactly what's projected now. But if you do that versus the straight line, your remaining straight line is going to be just slightly higher. So we put a straight line in there, but those structuring items can be worked in. There's 100 of them that we can run. We just wanted to present the concept that you
Okay.
have options here.
Well, I've reached a point in my life at my age that I avoid flat lines.
Me too.
Can you explain to me, you referred to a complete package we did, 2001 with, who was it that we did a restructuring?
The per side loan,
Uh-huh.
that was done in 2013, I
Okay,
believe.
no, not the first side loan, the one that we did a restructure or refinance.
Of the 2004 bond.
Uh-huh.
We did that several years back, and that has been paid off.
Okay,
And-
but can we compare that to what we have to deal with now and,
Actually, yes, we can. And we can also compare what we did to refinancing the PERS side fund loan. The PERS side fund loan was in the amount of, I believe it was 1.5, 1.8 million, maybe as close to $2 million. We were being charged 7.5% interest. We got down to 2.98. We saved $400,000 in interest costs over the term of the loan. So, and we created predictability.
which is what we want to do?
Exactly, yes. And when we refinanced the Eric's debt from 2004, when we went through BBVA for that loan, we refinanced, which was bond issue, we
Right.
refinanced it down to a 5-year loan at 1.58%. Now, obviously, we're not going to get the same
We're not
rates,
able to do that,
but we
yeah.
saved a significant amount of money. And Eric is right. There is no crystal ball on how investments are going to be in the future. Even, let's say we decided to pay off all our UAL at $10 million. Our debt has gone to PERS. PERS is moving along. There's nothing to stop PERS from having another bad year in the future. So that just means 4 years from now, there may be another amount we owe PERS for unfunded accrued liability on our 2.7 to 55, our miscellaneous plan. That is that's a distinct possibility. We have 3 separate retirement plans. The classic or miscellaneous 2.7 at 55, which nobody can join anymore. It's closed. There's 2% at 60, which is for current employees of PERS if they transfer into the district. And then for those employees who have never been part of PERS, they're at 2% at 62. The benefits are much less. And when I look at the UALs for those, combined, it's about $1,500. The goal, when Governor Brown initiated the PEPPER process, is to cap the number of people in the high-level plans at where they are, and eventually they will go down like this until they fall off the system. And then you'll have more and more lower benefit employees. It's not going to be until that very last person falls off the system that we lose all these unfunded liabilities. But we are going to continue to reduce them, which in turn would then reduce the amount of possible future increases in liabilities, if that makes sense. Because the less employees we have, the less chance for unfunded liabilities. So over time, it's going to get better. Is it going to go away forever? No, but what I'm looking at here is I have a known debt of $10 million to PERS. If I do nothing over the next 20 years, it's going to cost me $10 million in interest. And that is on page 11, I'm sorry, $9.7 million. That's in page 11 of your handout. That shows you if we do nothing.
It looks
And-
like we have a lot more work to do on this. We'll be discussing this again. Are we
Yeah.
looking at the time?
I'm sorry, yeah.
We're going to go into
apologize for
December and
going a
go
little too
and into, we have a long agenda here. We're also going to be, will we be looking at this in our December Finance Committee meeting?
Yes, we will. My apologies.
Oh, no. I just want, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about the options and why.
Yes.
And we see all the different, I mean, I think Eric has said it, that there's over 100, there's probably more than 1,000 different ways of doing this.
permutations.
Yeah,
This is just conceptual.
okay.
It's all, you know.
All right,
And-
Eric, thank you very,
So,
very much.
Thank you.
My
for
pleasure.
your- Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, item 4B under new business, discussion action to adopt the local hazard mitigation plan update. Peter Martin, Manager of Water Resources.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we get ourselves back on track real quick here with this one. I'm very pleased to present to you a item today to adopt the final version of the local hazard mitigation plan. It's something I've been working on with other staff here at the district for almost a year, actually. So essentially, a lot of that was lead time for the review of it by the necessary agencies. So I just wanted to recap real quick where we are today. We kicked off this project at a staff level back in December of 2017. We had I'm sorry, and I should step back and just mention that local hazard mitigation plans are required to be updated every 5 years. We're on that 5-year cycle right now. That's why we're doing this. And that's in order for us to remain eligible for hazard mitigation planning funds through FEMA and Cal OES as well. So we reconvened the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee, which is made up of many agencies throughout the county and others that helped, held several public meetings to gather input through that committee. We did some public surveys this time, which was interesting. We got quite a bit of feedback during that, and we incorporated that into the plan. And then that plan was available for review, and we had a public hearing back in April where we did receive input from the board on that as well. And so the revised version of that plan was submitted to Cal OES for their initial review back in June. They completed their review in October 5th, and then FEMA subsequently approved it shortly thereafter. So the last step, we're here today, is to have you adopt the plan as the final piece to that to get this formally approved. So FEMA has a 9-step planning process. We kind of went through those 9 steps. Now we're at step number 8, and 9 is just to implement the plan. So won't spend too much time on that. But just some of the project elements, just a high level for the plan, is that you sort of identify the hazards throughout the county. You do a vulnerability assessment, so you look at all your facilities and assets, determine the vulnerability to some of those hazards. You also do a capability assessment, sort of looking at the capability of the district to respond to certain emergencies and hazards within the county. And then out of that, one of the final steps is to develop mitigation actions. And then Lastly, you've got to identify sort of your planned maintenance procedures. So you've got to continue to maintain this plan after it's been adopted. So there were 6 new actions in the plan. We did implement a few of them in the last iteration of the plan from 2012. And those were mostly related to wildfire and some of the hardening of electrical systems. We included the White Pines Lake Storage Restoration Project as an important piece of that. And then one of the items that was suggested was merging sort of this next plan into sort of a larger multi-agency local hazard mitigation plan and the next time we go around. So that was discussed amongst the agencies on the Highway 4 corridor specifically. And then one of the ideas was to look at a backup supply in the case of the flume, for instance, going down like a Darby fire in the past on Highway 4. And then lastly, given feedback from Director Strange, we did include strategic wildfire protection improvements for water supply in Sheep Ranch and West Point. So that's included now as an action as well. So the recommendation today is to adopt the resolution, adopting the plan formally to end this project and get it off submitted to FEMA. And I just wanted to note that the district has committed to an annual review at a minimum of this plan, so we've got to try to reconvene that hazard planning committee once a year at least, or after a large event as well. We should revisit it. So
Good. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the Calaveras County Water District Local Hazard Mitigation Plan as adopted, or as developed.
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion and a second. Any public comment on this item? Any discussion?
Oh, looks good. Thanks, Peter.
Good job, Peter. Rebecca, you take a roll?
Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Underwood?
Yes.
Director Bradley?
Yes. Thank you very much, Peter. And item 4C, discussion direction for the 2018 draft supplemental West Point Water System Master Plan. Again, Mr. Martin.
okay, so this is another project that's sort of been delayed a little bit, mostly due to competing priorities of the engineering department, but I'm very pleased to be before you today with the draft plan for you to provide direction on today. Essentially, this is sort of some follow-on work from the McCallum River countywide long-term water needs study that was done as part of a larger effort, which included some discussion on the wild and scenic designation of McCallum River. One of the items that have been identified in the past is that the water supply in West Point has some issues as far as just our supplies from Bear Creek and other areas with regard to reliability. And so what we did was we incorporated that into a larger project that included that long-term water needs study. And this is more targeted to sort of a narrow focus on a master planning effort to look at water supply reliability and redundancy as well. So basically, this is also sort of responsive to the water right permit extension that we applied for in Bear Creek a few years back. We did get some feedback from the State Water Board asking for more information on exactly what the district planned to do should they get that 40-year extension. So this would be responsive to that too as well. So there's kind of a twofold approach as far as the short and long-term planning associated with this project. So today I have Mr. Jeff Meyer, formerly of ECOR, now of Western Hydrologics, and also Jack Scroggs from Castle. They're going to tag team this presentation today.
So what's the story, Jeff?
Thanks.
I see eCore's got all their little emblems and stuff on here, so.
Yes, so about 5 months ago, I decided it might be better for me to venture off on my own. Brought Jared Emery with me from ECOR, and he and I have been working together about 12 years. And we figured, it's time to try it. So we think we can be a little bit more efficient and responsive with our little company, and so we did it.
Well, good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
bet.
congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Good to be back here. So I'm just going to do a little introduction. This is a unique study where we're looking at both raw water supplies and then looking at the conveyance, storage, treatment, and distribution facilities and improvements on how we can make the system a little bit more reliable and robust. And so I have a certain set of skills that can identify whether a surface water impoundment or various projects can increase the yield of this project. And Jack has a set of skills that can create designs for these different facilities, and he's got good ideas about how to improve some of these facilities so that they are more robust and reliable. And so we tag teamed. When I was with ECOR, I asked Jack to work with me on this project, and then we continued that work after I left. And so the approach is unique. Really what we're looking at is developing preliminary plans and cost estimates for the projects that have been suggested in the long-term water needs study and also the 2004 West Point Water Supply Master Plan. Some of those have been implemented from the master plan, but some have not, some of the projects included. And so Jack did a lot of the design work, and then I tested those designs to see what improved the project. And so I used what I call operation studies. I'll explain more about that when I get my turn to talk. And then we worked with Charles and Peter to prioritize all these projects, and we're going to, in the report, recommend which ones we would carry forward. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
President Radman, members of the board, and my name is Jack Scruggs, Castle Consulting Engineers. As Jeff mentioned, Castle has teamed with Jeff's group here in developing this supplemental water supply master plan. And again, as Jeff mentioned, it's connected to and is developed from the long-term McCalmey River Needs Study that was prepared for the board in October of 2017. And it also follows up from the 2004-2005 West Point Water Master Plan. So let me see if I can work this here. Which way is it? This way? There we go. Good. Okay, good. So kind of briefly, what's the scope? Why are we doing this? What's included in the master plan? So at the heart is where's the water coming from and what's the reliability of those sources? So part of our scope is to evaluate the supply sources. And then how does that supply get conveyed to your water treatment facilities? So evaluating the conveyance facilities. The storage facilities, both the in-stream and the off-stream or offline storage facilities. Treatment. And then what happens after it's treated, the distribution system, storage, pumping, and pipelines. So we'll kind of go through those and hopefully not belabor anything too long. Okay. So again, the purpose is to evaluate sources and supplies versus demands. And then also to look at those improvements that will augment the source, identify what those improvements are, and then to prioritize them so that you have a blueprint or a master plan to say, okay, here's this menu of improvements. Some are short-term, some are long-term. What are those improvements that should be done immediately, and what are those estimated costs? I'm not going to get too much into costs. Jeff's going to talk more about costs and benefits after I kind of go through my part of the presentation. There we go. Okay, so this is a slide to kind of maybe keep in mind. Hopefully you have a copy of the PowerPoint or have access to this particular slide. In the October 27th water needs study, the current demands for the West Point area were identified. So average day about 0.2, a little less than 200,000 gallons per day. Maximum day, which is really what we look at as far as design, a little under 500,000 gallons per day. and an annual demand of about 212 acre-feet per year. It's a number to kind of keep in mind, that 212 acre-feet per year. Long-term, looking out to the year 2100, and that's the window that we included in the long-term needs study, that average day demand increases somewhat up to about 0.3 of a million gallons, or up to about 300,000 gallons per day. Maximum day goes up to about 3/4 of a million gallons. And the annual demand, again, a number to kind of keep in mind, about 327 acre-feet per year. That's kind of our scorecard of what our demands are. So where are we going to get this water? Well, we have two sources, Bear Creek, which is on the north, and we'll kind of have a little overview map here in just a moment. In fact, maybe we can kind of look at that right now. Bear Creek, which is on the northerly side. Oops, my laser working right? Maybe it doesn't work on me. Okay, it doesn't work. Okay, sorry about that. So Bear Creek is on the northerly end of the service area, which includes the communities of West Point, Wilseyville, Bummerville, some portions of Railroad Flat. And the advantage of, okay, thank you. I got too many instruments here. The advantage of Bear Creek is that it's a gravity feed system. So district doesn't need to pump to get the water to the treatment plant. It's a gravity conveyance to the water treatment plant. The district now has water rights. They can divert up to 4 cubic feet per second from Bear Creek and up to 150 acre-feet per year. The Middle Fork McConnell River, which is along the southerly border of the service area, that water must be pumped to the West Point Water Treatment Plant. And the district has an agreement now with the Calaveras Public Utility District to purchase up to, or to divert up to 200 acre-feet per year. So if you look at those two numbers.
And when does that agreement expire?
Okay, now that's going to have to turn to Peter on that. Because I know that there has ongoing discussions with that.
Yeah, so that agreement expires in 2023, but we're kind of taking a look at it, and CPUD is aware that we're doing this study to evaluate how we go forward on that contract as well.
So in a perfect world, there's 150 acre-feet of per year that the district has rights to from Bear Creek. Currently, a 200 acre-feet per year agreement with CPUD. That comes up to 350 acre-feet per year. Projected demands, long-term 327 acre-feet per year. So that all looks pretty good. Of course, the problem is that supplies don't always occur at the same time that demands are.
Well, and I would argue that that it isn't as good as it might sound, because those aren't our water rights. You know, all of that water is not being met by our water rights that we have full control over. We're relying on another agency to sell us water.
You are second in line. There's no question about that.
So my recommendation all along has been that we need to secure more water rights up there so that we're self-sufficient. Not that I don't want to purchase water from them, but at the same time, we have, you know, a 5-year agreement now, and I know that, as Peter just mentioned, it's going on, but as a board, moving forward, that's something that you all should consider is that permanent water right up there.
Now, I think that, and maybe to your point there, I think that when the 2004-2005 master plan study was done, there was a lot of focus on strengthening the supply from Bear Creek.
Wilson Dam is on Bear Creek, right?
Correct.
And we don't use it?
Correct. Well, we'll talk about that. It's coming right up. You're skipping ahead here.
Okay, okay.
Give me a moment.
Oh, there it is right there.
So, yes, there it is right there. So Bear Creek, again, it's advantageous in that it's a gravity feed to the district's facilities. However, what became very evident during those drought years is that it was an unreliable year-round supply source. So district has rights to it, it gravity feeds, But in anything, even average and certainly below average rainfall runoff years, the system could not reliably, does not reliably meet the current West Point demands. So a lot of what we've done here as far as looking at sources, we are looking at both sources, understanding that the McCollum River source does depend on this agreement with CPUD, but also understanding that the McCollum River, Middle Fork McCollum River is certainly fed by a much larger drainage shed than Bear Creek and has a higher reliability factor than Bear Creek does. Okay, so in the master plan, supplemental master plan that we prepared with Jeff's group, we kind of broke this down into systems. So we have the Bear Creek system, and we have the Middle Fork McCollum River system. So the Bear Creek system, to President Radaman's point, includes Wilson Dam. That is an online storage facility. There's the Bear Creek diversion structure, the Bear Creek diversion pipeline, which was improved after the master plan, last master plan was prepared. There's the regulating reservoir at West Point, and then there's a pipeline that goes from the regulating reservoir to the West Point water treatment plant. So that makes up the parts. Okay, so Wilson Dam. A lot of discussion both during the long-term McCollum River analysis as well as in this master plan as far as Wilson Dam. What are we going to do? What's the direction for the district for Wilson Dam? I think in talking with Jeff earlier, part of the issue was that it was sort of understood that the capacity of Wilson Dam was about 50 acre-feet. Turns out it doesn't have that kind of capacity. It's about half of that. So the current capacity is about 25 acre-feet. And it's in a condition that it doesn't reliably hold that storage. It leaks, okay? And there has been studies done by the district and by others as far as why that's happening. It was thought that perhaps it was a faulty drain valve, that was part of it. It was also thought that perhaps it was seeping along the backfill with that drain pipe. But really, when we go back and look at the studies that have been done on Wilson Dam, the issue is the underlying material that the dam is constructed on. The material of the dam, it appears, does not is holding fine. It's not seeping through the dam. It's going underneath the dam. And so there isn't I'm not getting into too much engineering, there isn't a cutoff wall between the material of the dam and the native material below it, okay? So it's sort of a systemic problem to get to that. And so in order to try to, so we looked at a couple of options. We looked at restoring the capacity of the existing structure and facilities to get it back to a 25 acre-foot capacity. We looked at expanding that facility first to 50 acre-feet. One of the issues we found that when we expanded it to try to expand it to 50 acre-feet is that the elevation was actually higher than Winton Road. So we thought, okay, well, that's probably not the right approach. But we looked at raising Winton Road also. And then we kind of came back as a compromise to expand it to 40 acre-feet so that we wouldn't have to raise the elevation of Winton Road, but we'd still get additional capacity out of it. And then I guess a fourth option then was to decommission the existing structure and to pursue a meadow restoration project. So Jeff will talk a little bit more about what the costs and benefits are of those options. Those options are included as part of the study. So Wilson Dam is certainly, a part of the Bear River system. Okay, as we move downstream, we have an existing diversion structure. And while it does need maintenance, it does silt up, what we found is that the structure itself was okay, as it operates satisfactorily. Again, it does require some ongoing maintenance. It silts up in the wintertime, to use a technical term. So it does require ongoing maintenance, and one thing that it is lacking, there was historically a metering station at that location, and that had been removed. It's the one issue about the Bear Creek diversion, it's in a rather remote location. It's hard to maintain surveillance of it as far as security. And we looked at the possibility of providing this metering facility at another location along the pipeline, but staff suggested that no, they would prefer to put the flow metering back at the Bear Creek diversion structure. There is an existing partial flume there now, so the structure is there, but the metering device has been removed. So the proposal is to put the metering device back in, provide adequate security for it, and to provide for ongoing metering at the point of diversion. Again, the district is limited in its diversion to 4 cubic feet per second, so it's good to know how much is actually being diverted. The Bear Creek pipeline, you folks authorized construction of that back in 2004, 2005. That was kind of the poster child of the last master plan because it was in bad shape, holes, it leaked, and you've replaced it. So it's a 16-inch high-density polyethylene pipe. It has the capacity of 4 CFS, works fine. We don't need to do anything more with that. Okay, so next we get to the regulating reservoir, and this is the reservoir that's located near the West Point water treatment plant. Again, there was some question as far as what the actual capacity was of the regulating reservoir.
Jack, I just have one quick question, sorry to interrupt. So have you ruled out a SCADA system for that Bear Creek diversion? Because
No, we haven't ruled it out. The question that I had as to whether or not, and Jeff's group came up with this answer, was to whether or not we could physically get a signal from that canyon area down there. Right. Typically, SCADA needs enough satellite coverage to be able to provide it, and since it's remote, we looked at providing another metering device much closer to the discharge to the regulating reservoir. Again, between staff and Jeff's group, they came up with a plan that yes, they could reinstall a metering device there. They could get SCADA communication with that, and so that was the direction that the master plan has taken. But we did look at other options.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Obviously, it's important that that information be relayed back to the water treatment plant and to the operators there. Okay, regulating reservoir. So there was some question as far as what the capacity was of the regulating reservoir. Both aerial topography surveys were done, and then when the lake was at, or the reservoir was at its lowest level, we did hydro surveys out there. We had our surveyors out there, and we transected back and forth across the reservoir, and we took depths, and so basically we mapped the bottom of the reservoir. And we found that when the district adds 2 stop logs at the spillway, that we've got about 52.7 acre-feet of storage there. So again, through the study, the work that Jeff's group did, found that there would be a significant benefit to the district if that storage was improved. And this kind of also will blend also into the discussion with Wilson Reservoir. So we looked at a couple of different alternatives to expand that to about 150 acre-feet, about 3-time expansion. And we ran through several different design iterations, and we reviewed them with your engineering staff, and we've come up with what we believe to be a good option for expanding that reservoir. Not only raising the level of the reservoir, but also excavating it out in order to be able to create that kind of storage. So that's kind of a medium to long-term improvement. But in the short term, right now, the way the reservoir works, and I'm not sure this picture is really going to help you. What you see there, sort of, is a slant sluice gate that goes down to the bottom of the reservoir. And that's the only way the water goes in and out. That's the only way the water comes out of the reservoir. Okay, so right now, the district is taking water to the water treatment plant from the bottom of the reservoir. And there's, you know, the water sits in that reservoir for a long period of time. It gets stagnant. There's some aesthetic issues associated with that. And so what we've recommended is that that bottom outlet be modified so that it can still, that sluice gate can still work if they needed to release water quickly, but to basically provide a tee off of that and with the floating intake, so that now we would, instead of taking water from the bottom of the reservoir, we're gonna take water from near the top. And we've done this on other projects. It's a float, looks like a big box out there, and attached to that float is the pipe, a flexible pipe, typically high-density polyethylene, with the screen on it. What that does now, it keeps the fish and the turtles and the rocks and the mud and the stuff that's now getting into your water treatment plant, keeps it out, but it's not right at the top where you've got potential algae and floating other materials, it's down below. So the idea is if we take the very best water out of the reservoir, there's less energy and less chemicals associated with treating that. So that's a short-term improvement. So,
when was that photo taken?
it was in September of 2017.
So have they put a different aeration system in out there then?
Well, I believe there's 3 aerators. There's one that's very close to, above where the bottom intake is now. And then there's 2 other aerators that help maintain the dissolved oxygen in the water, and I think also help break up the surface algae.
Right, so this is this is an aeration system that throws water in the air.
Right, it's a surface aerator, correct.
Yeah, versus the others are benthic aerators that turn the lake over.
Okay, gonna have to yield.
Peter, talk to me, because that's a system we put in.
I'm sorry, yeah, so, there's 2 stages here. I think you're aware of the one that's kind of like around the perimeter of the lake, kind of like a bubbler. It's an aeration system that's sort of, and this comes on during certain times when water quality is poor. They don't use that routinely. Typically, it's sort of the secondary aeration system, and it's out there floating in the lake, so.
Okay, so which is which? Because
So
the
yeah.
system that was put in of basically lake turnover eliminated all the odor issues and everything that they were complaining about.
Yeah, so the bubbling system that it's kind of just, there's multiple points throughout the
Right.
lake, that's always running. And then this comes on, my understanding, during certain times when they have, certain taste and odor issues. And it's, I think, I'm not sure how they go through that operations process and, on that, so. But, yeah, so there's 2 stages there as far as aeration of that facility, so.
Okay, I was unaware that they put this floating aerator in.
Yeah, that was during Bill Purley's tenure. I'm not sure, actually it probably preceded me too, I think, before I got here.
We were up there on a camera tour. I think there's 2 of those in the lake. The other one's at the very, very far end of it.
Yeah, so this is really close to the outlet structure, this one larger aerator.
Right.
That sits on the surface, but there are others that are sort of around the perimeter, sort of dispersed throughout the reservoir itself, that are always running.
The plot thickens.
Now, I mean, we haven't done a test that shows level of dissolved oxygen with the depth of the lake, but I'd be willing to bet my 40-some years of experience that as you drop down further in the lake, you're gonna drop down in dissolved oxygen. So the idea is, providing a intake that's closer to the surface, we're gonna get the best possible quality of water into your water treatment facilities, and by providing a screen, you're gonna keep fish and turtles and things from getting into your water treatment plant. So, not that your water treatment plant is not capable of handling that, it's capable of handling it very well. It's just that you can reduce the amount of maintenance and operation by starting with the best possible source of water to begin with. So that's the idea there. And it's a relatively low-cost improvement. Okay, so we go from Bear River storage, diversion, pipeline, raw water pipeline, regulating reservoir, and then there's a pipeline that goes from the regulating reservoir to the water treatment plant. There was no proposed improvements on that relatively limited section of pipeline. So now we get to McConnelly River, Middle Fork McConnelly River system. So its complementary storage facility is Shad's Reservoir, and that is a CPUD reservoir. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's about 1,700 acre-feet capacity. The district diverts water from the Middle Fork McConnelly River with intake facilities. The picture on the cover of the slides, the PowerPoint, is the current intake facilities. There is a pump station and a supply pipeline that delivers then the water from the Middle Fork up to the West Point water treatment plant. Now it can also, if the water treatment plant, let's say, is going through different cycles, flushing cycles, filtering cycle, or different, other than filter, in the water from the Middle Fork pump station can go directly into the regulating reservoir. So the regulating reservoir, that pipeline can actually go two ways. It can get feed water from the Middle Fork McConnelly River pump station and also take water from the regulating reservoir back to the water treatment. Okay, so we'll kind of go through this system. Shad's Reservoir, again, owned and operated by CPUD, 1,700 acre capacity. In the long-term McConnelly River study, we evaluated expanding it by up to 250 acre feet. This is a kind of not schematic, but from the USGS quad, the reservoir itself. There's some issues which we have not gone into any depth yet to explore how those get resolved. But part of the reservoir is actually on Forest Service property, and part of it is on private property, on Sierra Pacific Industries property. So there's some challenges there as far as further expansion of it. And I'm not. I'd have to go back and go through my discussions with Donald Otherman as far as how this is handled right now. But part of the reservoir is actually not on that property. So we come down the Middle Fork and we get to the intake facilities. Now, in the winter of 2016, 2017, if you recall, we had some rather historic floods. I don't know if we actually got to a 100-year flood condition on that river, but it was pretty impressive. The water was ripping through there pretty good. And it damaged the intake facilities. And so we'll kind of look at that, what happened there. But those intake facilities were replaced in kind in July 2018. So our master plan said, okay, that's fine, we're going to put back what was there, but if what was there was damaged before, it's likely to be damaged again. And so we looked at a couple of different options as far as relatively short-term improvements to improve the intake. So this was the intake, what it looked like, I believe, in about May of 2017. And there's a little, again, my pointer doesn't work, but down in the lower left-hand corner is the end of what left of the collection pipe. Okay, so it was kind of a stub pipe because the rest of it was removed. So that's that stub pipe there, and then that's the collector that was damaged and was removed by staff. So in 2018, summer 2018, that pipe was replaced. But we would consider that to be a short-term solution, not a long-term solution. And so we have included in the master plan modifications to that to provide for basically where the collector surface collector stops now to put a concrete structure with a screen intake. That was one option. And then what we worked with staff, it was to actually install because I'm missing a slide here, was to install a collector pipe system within the creek bed itself. We did this back in 1991 for the Jenny Lind Water Treatment Plant. It's kind of a modified rainy type collector, R-A-N-N-E-Y. The distribution pipes are, perforated pipes are embedded in the stream bed itself. There's a manifold system. That manifold then would then feed the pump station. So those are two options. Again, the engineering staff likes the rainy collector type option, and that's the option that's being evaluated as far as costs and benefits. So from the collector then goes to the existing pump station. Existing pump station needs to be replaced. It only has 200 gallon minute capacity. At the time, when perhaps when this source was considered to be primarily supplemental to the Bear Creek source, I guess that was the understood design criteria. But I think what we're looking at is in the future that because the Bear Creek supply source we know can be unreliable, that we really need to be able to looking at a pump station that can meet the full demands for the West Point system, and that's about 500 gallons a minute. So we're looking at increasing that pump and pipeline capacity from about 200 gallons a minute capacity up to 500 gallons a minute capacity. The existing structure also, that's the green building on the left there, is too low. It floods. It flooded in 2016, 2017. We get water into the electrical components. You can see there's kind of water damage on the floor there. It needs to be replaced. So as part of the master plan, we've looked at then a layout, again, same site, but constructing a new pump station a little bit further back from the river, but using the same collector facilities coming out of the river, going then into the new pump station, which is raised about 3 feet higher as far as the floor elevation than the existing, and then making some improvements as far as the access into the pump station itself. This, if you've been to the pump station, it's on Charles Avenue. It's kind of a hairpin turn trying to get down there, so we're trying to at least improve the access a little bit to be able to, for the operators to have an improved all-weather access. So we did a kind of a schematic design here for a 2-pump station, 100% redundancy. Engineering has suggested that maybe ultimately it becomes a 3-pump station, any 2 pumps being able to meet that 500 gallon a minute capacity. Again, I won't say that's a fine point, but that's something that can be developed further in the design phase. Concrete masonry unit building, skylight access or hatch to be able to pull the pumps if we need to. But again, a facility that has about 500 gallon a minute capacity versus 200 gallon a minute capacity. Now, part of the issue with the capacity is the existing pipeline. It's a 6-inch pipeline, a 6-inch diameter pipeline. And again, the pipeline in combination with the pump station only delivers about 200 gallons a minute to the West Point Water Treatment Plant. So what we're proposing is that would be replaced with an 8-inch diameter pipeline that in conjunction with the proposed pumps would be able to deliver 500 gallons a minute. We looked at a couple of different alternative routes. It's probably a little hard to see here. The route furthest to the north, that's the existing route, which involves going across the Middle Fork McCombie River, going up along Barney Avenue, and then along some easements, and then continuing up is Bald Mountain Road, portion of Bald Mountain Road, and then through another easement up to up to the water treatment plant. We looked at the possibility of trying to avoid those easement areas. Some of them are a little difficult to maintain. So one of the routes would not cross the Middle Fork of the Macomb River at the pump station, but would stay on Charles Avenue, go up along Highway 26, all the way to the pump station. That proved to be about 3,200 feet longer, plus you're dealing with Caltrans for that whole route. And then we looked at a kind of a hybrid between the two, again, longer than the existing route, and having to deal with Caltrans for a good portion of that route. Caltrans will certainly work with you to construct improvements across their road and on the shoulder of their road, but in some of these places, we don't have a shoulder. And so the pipeline would have to go into the roadway, and that would be problematic for the district and for Caltrans to get that approved. So we kind of abandoned the idea of using State Route 26, and we're, back onto using the existing easements. Again, it's about 3,000 feet shorter than the other alignment alternatives, and we wouldn't be dealing with Caltrans. 2 pluses. Okay, so we get the raw water now to the treatment plant. What's the status of the treatment plant? Well, you folks built a new treatment plant in 2001. It's a beautiful plant. It has plenty of capacity, 1 million gallons per day capacity. Again, we're looking at a long-term demand of 500 gallons a minute. This has 700 gallons a minute. The only issue with it, and what staff kind of has directed us, is that it's one treatment facility. It's one train. Hindsight might have suggested to have 2 500,000 gallon per day plants, but it's one 1 million gallon per day plant. So from a reliability and from a maintenance standpoint, it's not the best arrangement. I don't mean to kick the previous engineer under the bus, but staff has suggested that a high priority for them would be to have a redundant plant in order to provide for both improved reliability and for ongoing maintenance. Okay. After the 2005 master plan, there were a number of recommendations made, and the district has completed a number of those. Treated water storage was added at West Point Water Treatment Plant for fire flow and for maximum day demand. Same with Bummerville, a 150,000 gallon tank was installed there. New distribution systems were installed at West Point, at Wilseyville, in order to meet maximum day demand plus fire flow. That's always our design criteria, MDD plus fire flow. Water supply main was constructed from the West Point Water Treatment Plant to the Bummerville tank. One of the elements that was not completed was improvements to the Bummerville distribution system. So currently, the distribution system cannot supply fire flows and maximum day demands throughout the system. So that is an element that needs to be addressed. So with that, I'm going to turn that back over to Jeff.
So there was at one time, when CPUD had their ditch that emptied into the Licking Fork, across Blue Mountain Road and all, there was a branch of that came down into the Wilseyville camp and fed a small reservoir in Wilseyville. And so I don't know if you looked at any of the old historic stuff on that, but the other issue is that there is a project that CPUD will eventually adopt, and that is the pipeline or ditch from, over to Jeff Davis Reservoir.
Right.
And so, because historically, both CPU, at least Wilseyville, which is now in our service area that we provide water to, received water from that ditch. Mm-hmm. There's been discussion of teaming with CPUD because it makes their project more fundable, so to speak, because there's a lot more benefits as you went through the MAC, IRWM benefit, kind of, check the boxes. And in fact, Pat McGreevy sitting in here was involved with that, and he's the one that really brought it to everyone's attention. It's like, why don't you guys team together?
Right. And it's a wonderful project. We did the preliminary planning for that project twice now. We did it in
Okay.
2001, and we revisited it again in 2013.
Okay,
It's a 36-inch diameter, 30 or 36-inch diameter pipeline. Comes from Shad's Reservoir. We can get gravity, it's a beautiful project. Gravity
Right.
flow from the current diversion, no, it comes from Shad's Reservoir. Gravity flow, and we can get over to the Licking Fork. And actually, there's enough head to be able to take that water and go down the Licking Fork Canyon and back up to the other side and feed Jeff Davis Reservoir without pumping. So we eliminated pump station, big pump station, 400 horsepower pumps.
yeah, it's huge. I
Yeah.
live just below it.
And they could generate upwards of 1 kW of power.
Power, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great project. Problem is money. So the last estimate that we did was something north of $11 million.
Right,
And the issue is, where is that money gonna come from? The project was initially excited. In fact, we were not even the first ones. Weber Gillo did it back in '88, and then we did it twice, now 2001 and 2013. And in 2001, if you recall, that we were in the middle of brownouts and all those kinds of things, and people were looking for alternate energy sources. And that was a time that we thought that we could get some grant money for CPUD, enough to be able to make this work. So far, we've not been able to put enough grant monies together to now put together a $11 million project. The other
Right.
issue is that the ditch, like so many of our ditches in our foothill areas, didn't really have a whole lot of written easements over it. And so they were prescriptive. And the district CPUD hasn't operated that ditch for 12, 15 years.
Yeah, I think they officially abandoned it, worse yet.
Well, I don't know if I'd use that word, but trying to recapture a prescriptive right over it would be a challenge for somebody with a higher pay grade than me. But that would be the issue, because it's trying to remember all my numbers. It's 30,000 feet of pipeline. It's a lot of pipeline.
Right.
And to be able to utilize that existing alignment, of course, would be huge, because you could. It's got the vertical that we need, because we know it flows. So we
Right.
could use that vertical alignment, and if they could still get the prescriptive rights, so they wouldn't have to purchase all that easement, that would make the project right there. But it's a question of getting funding for it.
So my question is that because Wilseyville used to receive water out of that, that ditch and all, did you look at any sort of feed? I don't know if the gravity is there to get into the Bear Creek system from Shad through a
Well-
different direction?
Yeah, I mean, and Charles talked to us about this, and so, there was a discussion about having a satellite water treatment plant that would be fed from that pipeline, that Middle Fork McCollum River ditch pipeline, and that could serve a satellite water treatment plant. But it's gonna depend on being able to construct that project. And again, it's been on the books since like '88, and so far we haven't been able to pull together enough funding to be able to build it, so.
Okay.
It was discussed and it was
Right, okay.
evaluated, but we just don't see that in the short term that's gonna happen.
Great,
Okay?
thank you.
Jack, before you sit down, just have a, what I would consider to be a helpful suggestion
Okay.
for board members like me particularly. We started off at the onset by saying that this supply demand is 327 acre feet per year. And then you have page after page after page where we scoot back and forth between acre feet, and
Yeah.
gallons per minute and everything. Could you kind of do a translation that a 500 gallon per minute pump would have to run 29 days straight to produce 327 acre feet? I mean, that's,
Okay, I see what you're saying.
does it confuse anybody else, or
No.
it doesn't?
No. We can handle that,
Well,
mentally.
and that's, I was trying, not to be too defensive about this, but I was trying in this little table here to give it million gallons per day and gallons per minute and acre feet per year, so that there would be some translation back and forth, but,
Well, but looking at a page that's in the back of your report, I'd just like to know, just as a footnote, that a 500 gallon a minute pump would produce on an annual basis how many acre feet? And I can do that mental translation.
okay, while Jeff is talking, can I work on that? I'll get it back to you.
All right.
Okay, I don't have that number at the top, well, I could guess, but let me work on it, okay?
I've got a whole page of scribble here and I can't figure it out yet.
And a calculator.
And no offense intended, believe me, so.
I appreciate the heads up.
Okay, so
Just done it
Jack,
a little bit,
Jack took his time and designed a lot of these things, and then I came in and evaluated these things with some operations modeling. And that helped me determine the water supply benefits for some of these projects. Also, based on his construction estimates and some environmental costs that we think would be associated with the construction of these things, we came up with a cost of supply per acre foot. I work in acre feet, CFS in acre feet.
Okay.
We did some qualitative source water quality evaluation. There is at least one regulatory requirement that we have to honor, and then worked with staff to come up with project priorities. And so, first thing I want to talk about is how I determine the water supply benefits. And what I did is use an operations model. And I want to take some time here to make sure you understand what I did. So if you have questions on this, let's ask it right now, okay? So what I've done is built a model of the system, computer model. And in that model, I represent the rivers, the streams, the diversion capacities, the reservoir capacities, and I also take the historic hydrology, unimpaired hydrology. Unimpaired is not modified by man in any way. That water comes down the hill. It's captured by shads. It's captured by Wilson and the regulating reservoir. And then we use that supply to meet demands. And the reason I use the historic unimpaired hydrology is because that gives us an indication of what the watershed can produce. There are dry years, there are wet years, and there's everything in between. And so we want to test the system with that full range of hydrology. And what I've learned from working in the Sierra Nevada is that generally 1976 and 77 define what a critical period is, and that is the design period for a lot of these projects, which means that if you can make it through that period, you probably got a good project that's going to get you through drought conditions. Okay, so I ran a full record, I believe, I don't remember exactly what the record is, but I believe it went from I think it went from 1922 to 2015. Indeed, in this system, I checked all the drought periods. In this system, 76 and 77 are the critical period. So I focused on that 2-year period to see if some of these projects can help increase water supply for the West Point system. Everybody with me? Okay. Okay, so if we switch to the next slide, I hope you have something in front of you can see, because I can't see that very well. So we went through a lot of these, and of course we have some things that are going to improve reliability, not necessarily quantity. And so I've got a list of projects in here. Some are not going to increase yield at all. But they improve the system in some way. I'll go through all of them. The first thing we have on the list is the new Middle Fork McCullum River pump station. I didn't want to separate that out on its own But what I've got here are new intake facilities associated with that pump station, replacement of the Middle Fork McCullough River pipeline. I don't think you do one without the other, so I grouped them. And those facilities alone will get you another 11 acre feet in a 76, 77 type drought condition. And so what I did is look at the total cost, divide that by 11 acre feet, and that gives you $378,900 per acre foot. Sounds expensive, but it gives you reliability. It serves the community for the long term. If you increase the capacity of regulating reservoir, you gain 5 acre feet in a 76, 77 type drought. That'll cost you $527,000 per acre foot. Again, there are a lot of benefits there. You're maximizing your water right. There's some implications with Wilson Dam that I'll get to in a minute. You get the floating screen outlet, a regulating reservoir, doesn't provide any additional supply, so I didn't associate a cost with it per acre foot. Modification of the Bear Creek diversion, again, this is a regulatory requirement that you measure your diversion, so we need to do that. It doesn't improve your water supply, it just meets regulation. We looked at increased capacity and stability of Wilson Dam at both 50 acre feet and 40 acre feet. And to my surprise, it provided no additional water supply. And I looked at that because I didn't believe the answer at first. And I looked at that, and what I found is that the water supply developed in Bear Creek during 76 and 77 isn't enough to benefit Wilson. You can capture all of that water by the Bear Creek diversion and the expanded regulator storage. And so expanding regulator captures that water. You don't need Wilson. And it was a bit of a surprise, but I checked it, it's right. So I'll get to my recommendation on Wilson a bit later, but if I'm gonna invest money, I'm going to put it in regulator, not in Wilson.
Jeff, just stepping back one second, the reason that the new pipeline from
Bear Creek?
No, not from Bear Creek, from the river up to the West Point, is that, how old is that? And is it dilapidated? Is that the reason it's being?
From the Middle Fork?
Yeah.
I don't know how old it is. You know, Jack?
I believe it was installed in the 80s. The reason that we're looking to replace it, it's only 6-inch diameter. It's too small.
Right, okay, thanks.
And the reason it provides more yield is because the proposed project's a bigger system. You can move more water through it and put it into an expanded regulator.
Okay.
Regulating reservoir. We also looked at Shad Reservoir expansion. That gives us 119 acre feet.
One other question, can we store that water that are we supposed to be storing that water that we get out of the Middle Fork?
In regulating reservoir?
Yeah, into the regulating reservoir. From what I understand, it's supposed to be used, we buy and use it?
Well, so.
Would it be a new agreement or a new, how does?
So storage, there's a 30-day rule on storage. So if you don't hold that water for more than 30 days, it's not considered stored, it's considered regulated. It's a regulating reservoir. In this instance, I think you can store it short-term and then put it to use without a storage permit.
Oh, and that's what we're talking about here? Would we, by increasing the capacity, would we have more capacity than we could ever use then?
At regulating reservoir?
Yeah,
So you can fill it with Bear Creek water.
right,
Sorry, Beaver. Sorry, Bear Creek.
Bear Creek, right.
You caught me on that before. You can fill it with that water. You have 150 acre foot permit already. You don't need to change it.
So when summertime comes and there's not enough water in there.
Right.
And now we're pumping water out of the Middle Fork,
Right?
that would be or by expanding it would be avoid having to pump water and buy water from, if we expand regulating.
In some years, I think you would see a benefit, yes, that's
Okay.
correct. So you would, until your demand reaches build out, you probably would see a benefit
Okay.
and need to pump less water from the Middle Fork.
And the regulating reservoir, does it have a name? And if it doesn't have a name, we got to give it a name.
I
Regulating
propose,
reservoir?
Martin Reservoir.
Yeah, the Peter Martin Reservoir? Okay, thank you.
Peter Martin Reservoir. We looked at Shad's Reservoir expansion. The yield in a 76, 77 type drought would be 119 acre feet. When we did the calcs, it is the best bang for your buck if you have the money to build it, and you can reach agreement with CPUD. A little bit shy of $40,000 an acre foot.
How much is that per gallon?
You're gonna have to ask Jack that one. Like I said, I work in acre feet.
I hope he's kidding.
So the two projects that Jack, I think, finished up with was the redundant West Point Water Treatment Plant and the Bummerville Water Distribution Improvements. Again, there's no additional yield, it's just redundancy and reliability. It's a value that I can't put a price on in terms of, yield for the project. So we do have a few items in here for source water quality. So that Middle Fork pump station improvement would move more water through the system, it can, and freshen up regulating reservoir, sorry. The floating intake that Jack suggested would also take water from higher up in the reservoir instead of down in the mud and what did you say, the fish and the turtles too? Yeah. And the dirt.
Better than bugs and bunnies.
And then the Shad's Reservoir expansion, we're taking water higher up in the watershed, storing it, and then when it's released, it goes through an aeration process just coming down the river, and then when you divert it, you've got a nice fresh source of water. Regulating requirements, a few years ago, I believe it was 2009, Senate Bill 88 was passed. There is a requirement associated with that to measure your diversions. And I do have a picture there. This is a close-up of one that Jack showed earlier. That you see the shape of that concrete there. It starts wide, it goes narrow, then comes out again. And then you see a trash rack. Let's see if I can get this to work. So this is the trash rack here. And right behind that trash rack is the pipe that goes from this diversion over to regulating reservoir. This concrete structure here is called a partial flume. And down here at the bottom, there's a little hole that goes into a stilling well that's under this wood box. And what we're proposing to do, in fact, we already have a contract to do this, is replace this wood box with a steel box. We're going to power this. This is where we're going to put a measuring device. We'll power it with a solar panel, and we also are going to answer your question, Director Strange, we have a satellite system that we have used for Georgetown Divide, Public Utility District, Placer County Water Agency, deep in canyons, and we've been able to get the signal out. And so we're pretty confident that we can do the same here. And the plan is to have this installed by the end of this month.
Is there, what's the reason for that Venturi-like shape of that structure?
Partial flume. It's just a flume that controls the flow so that you have uniform flow. Yeah.
It's a critical flow device, and so it measures, but when the measuring device is just typically a ultrasonic sensor, it measures the flow through that depth, through that critical flow,
Here's my notes.
and converts that flow, that depth to a flow.
Okay,
It's engineered.
You're gonna be
in that
here.
specific shape.
Right.
interesting.
And typically, these things have rating curves that come with them. There's probably one that exists somewhere for this. We may have to re-rate it ourselves by measuring the flow. And so then you associate a depth with a flow. That's what the rating curve is. And so this device that will be in this steel box will measure depth, and we'll convert it to flow using that rating curve.
Jeff, just curious, how much longer is the presentation expected to be? And the only reason we're asking, we're in a time crunch here. Director Strange will be leaving the meeting at 3:30, and there's a few other things on the agenda that we want to get to. So I'm not trying to rush you, just seriously, just looking at how much more time.
Not much. Give me, I can whip through it and give me a minute and a half.
Oh, wow, okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, Jeff, I appreciate it.
That's okay. So let's skip forward to the same thing. We're going to put in a measuring device, a regulator as well, to improve what's there. Okay, project priorities, and this is really kind of the key. This is what we're boiling all these projects down to. So I looked at a few things. The raw cost, that's got to be a consideration. You know, if it were me and I had the money, I think I'd invest in shads first, but there's a lot of other things to consider. Water supply benefits, water quality benefits, regulatory requirements, that has to be done now. Timing of need. Some things, you know, you don't have the big demands right now. That's out in the future. So things that you can improve right now is something we would focus on now. And then I combined all those, came up with a total score, and then a priority list, working with both Charles, Peter, and Jack to come up with these priorities. And so, number one, modification of Bear Creek, the gauging. We're doing that already. Peter already authorized.
The end of
us
the
to get
month,
going.
huh?
Yeah, it's going.
Check.
2, Bummerville water distribution improvements. Charles thought that was, we need to do that now. Number 3, where's number 3? Floating screen outlet, another inexpensive device that will improve water quality for the system. Number 4, redundant West Point water treatment plant, another thing that Charles wants right away. Number 5 is the improvements to the Middle Fork McCullough River pump station. 6, increased capacity at regulating reservoir. 7, Shad's Reservoir expansion. Wilson, I put in here 8 and 9, but I wouldn't do them. I would look at meadow restoration there. And I've got some, I mean, I've kind of explained Wilson Dam. I've got, you know, the priorities.
Do we have this handout that you're referring to? I don't see it here.
Sorry, I didn't print out the presentation today. I apologize.
Okay.
I can
so
provide
it's-
it. I can, or Peter has it. For Wilson Dam, I think it's expensive to rehabilitate. Operation studies indicate no benefit. Recommend decommissioning and meadow restoration. We've got a proposal from a consultant. I think Pat McCreevy and Peter have exchanged some emails. Some rough estimates indicate that it's much less expensive than trying to rehabilitate Wilson Dam. And you could get some credits for restoration there on maybe another project, maybe the expansion of Regulator Reservoir, possibly. And then lastly, I have a proposed schedule with the highest priority master plan improvements. I can go through it. These are things that probably should be done in the next 10 years. I think you can see a lot of the early things, early requirements for these projects is the environmental permitting. So you go through that, need to do some design work, and then construction can happen later. So that's about as fast as I can get through it.
Very,
Questions?
good.
Any more questions?
He promised for me to, or I promised him I would be quick on this. Why is the environmental assessment on Shad's Reservoir shown as estimated $1 million versus some of these others that are 1/10 of that?
Yeah, that is a good question. So when you raise a reservoir, there's lots of things to consider. Water supply, water right permits. When you raise it up, you're inundating area that wasn't inundated before. So there's a lot of biological surveys that need to happen around the perimeter.
Okay.
You have you have to take out all the trees, so you have a forest management plan, and we have to work with the Forest Service, which adds about, 400,000 right there.
Okay, well, when you talk to the consultant on that, tell him not to include any verbiage about Delta smelt.
Will do.
All right, thank you,
Anything
Jeff.
else?
Thank you, Jack. Really appreciate,
Thank you,
any other
gentlemen.
questions? I don't mean to.
Just
cut-
a real quick comment, remember, this water and all this work benefits a severely disadvantaged community, so there's gonna be a lot of free money available.
So, today,
One thing, Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
150 days.
150 days,
500
okay.
gallons a minute, all day long, we're gonna do 327 acre feet. So 150 days,
100 gallons or 500?
500 gallons a minute,
Okay, thank
all
you.
day long,
That puts my
Wow.
mind at ease. so.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for that.
The one thing I want to follow up on, I'm currently working with Forest Hill Public Utility District on a water right extension and a radial gate installation that raises the water surface at their reservoir Sugar Pine. And we're dealing with the Forest Service on Forest Service land. That's how I know that there's going to be a lot of work to do.
Okay, we've had our wars with environmental studies lately, so appreciate that. Thank you for your presentation.
so the request for today is just to get feedback from you so that we can move forward and see if you think we're on the right track here to start to finalize this plan for approval or adoption later. So.
Yeah, sounds good.
I
Yeah.
think the prioritizing. No,
Hey, Pat, come on up
come on,
to,
Pat.
or Mr. McGreevy, please come up to the microphone.
I have a million things to say, but I only want to, I'll limit it to one. If you're going to do the meadow restoration, I suppose that means you're going to disassemble the dam, and distribute the dirt over and create a meadow. And there's plenty of money to do that. And I think it was number 7 on your priority list, or the last on your priority list. But you could get people like Pat McGreevy and his meadow friends to actually write the grant and bring in Jim Wilcox or somebody like that to design the whole thing. And take your meadow all the way from the current dam, all the way up to Winton Road, to the culvert up on Winton Road, and fix the whole thing. SPI is more than happy to participate. They're loggers. They know how to remove all those trees. This is a gimme.
Okay.
And you'll get a lot of points in the ecological community. Any commentary on that?
I think you should prioritize engaging local consultants. That's, I think, the big nexus that hasn't happened as successfully as a lot of us would like to see.
And my comment, Pat,
That's a
can,
good comment.
We could
I'm
do a
sorry.
planning grant, followed by implementation.
like, continue working with staff on that idea and what you're talking about. Thank you. Hey, we're going to take a short break here. Peter, I'm sorry, are you done? I might seem like I'm trying to move this along a little quicker. than-
Just a really quick follow-up on Pat's comment. We did follow up with Plumas Corp., and that's where we've developed the figures for the initial planning work for Wilson Dam restoration. So he's been in contact with Pat in the past. I took some of that work and built upon that and included that into the plan as well. So.
He's the guru, Jim.
Any further public comment on this item? Okay, we're going to take a quick break here. We have 3 more items on our agenda before we, and one of them's for discussion action on Valley Springs surplus property. Robbie, we also have a workshop on local forest management initiatives that I know Pat is going to be involved with Peter again. And then we have discussion direction on customer assistance program. We may move these things around a little bit. We're going to have a quick break, discuss that, and we'll be back. We may make a change to our agenda priorities or order in which we take them going for the rest of the meeting. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Do that under the president's prerogatives?
Okay, we're back in session. We're going to make some changes to the agenda. We're going to move item 6A up to right now, and then we're going to take in order under new business 4D, and then the workshop. I'm sorry. Then we're going to do the workshop 5A, and then we'll go back to 4D. We're going to just make some quick changes. So with that said, item 6A. Discussion direction on customer assistance program, draft policy. Joel Metzger, Manager of External Affairs, Conservation, and Grants. Take it away, Mr. Metzger.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm here today to give you a draft policy that we have written per your direction, and this is with regard to the customer assistance program that we've been working on for the past year or so. Just as a quick refresher, the reason why this is before you today is that
340, I'm walking.
Mr. Egerton and I had done about 30 community meetings in advance of the rate increase on May of this year. And one of the main things we heard from your constituents and our customers was that many people were struggling to pay their water and wastewater bills, and was there anything that could be done to help with that? And what we found was there really weren't any programs that were in existence, any social welfare programs to help with water and wastewater, other than just a very limited few that the Resource Connection was running. And so we brought this back to the board, and each of you at town hall meetings heard this directly from your own constituents, and the board directed staff to come up with a policy for how this program would work before the end of the fiscal year. And so that's what we're doing today.
Okay, this will be the last item that I'm rushing through or trying to rush through. I promise. The other 2 items we're going to take our time, but Director Strange is leaving, and so I do want to get to the meat of this. I think we've seen a lot of this before, and so you do your part very quickly if you can.
Okay, so moving ahead to the policy. We have designed a policy that would replace the existing water or wastewater rate assistance policy in the policy handbook. And it has these components right here, and this draft policy was provided to the board for review. And so if I could just quickly walk you through what the design is and answer any questions that you have. The board did give us some direction at the last meeting, and the board gave us direction with a number of different figures and numbers, and so we chose one that we included in the policy, but please know that this is still a fluid document, and it's up to the board for what the final direction would be. But one of the things that we heard some consensus on was a $20 subsidy for water, and I'm sorry, I have a typo here. It's a $30 subsidy for sewer, and you could go with a $50 for both water and sewer if that is what you could qualify for. It would be a fiscal year program, so it would run from July 1st through June 31st, and credits will be provided only to eligible customers on a first-come, first-served basis. So if we choose a maximum number of customers and you are not able, and we still have more people who are applying, we'd have to have a wait list for those. We couldn't serve everybody potentially. But we're going to talk about funding a little bit later, and Jeff is going to help us out talking about funding a little later in the presentation. Some other requirements that we have built into the policy are you have to live at the property for more than half the year. This is not designed for second homeowners. You must have permission from the legal deeded owner to apply for this and get the credit if you do not own it. So this is how we could accommodate tenants. And based on our research so far, many of the people who would qualify for this would be tenants. And so we need a way for them to be able to apply. The main qualifier is the submission of a PG&E care program participation, and that would be in the form of a bill, and it's marked very clearly on your PG&E bill that you are a member of the care program. And the account must also be in good standing, and the definition in the policy of good standing is that you're not currently locked off, so you need to have an account that's active. The income threshold that we heard from the board was 200% of the federal poverty guideline per the Department of Health and Human Services, or anything below that. And that is also the income threshold that the CARE program requires, and so that matches up perfectly. And just as a reminder of what 200% looks like, you can see on the left side the size of the family, and then over on the far right in blue is how much you could make a year and qualify for this program based on your family size. The applications under the current policy would be submitted to the Resource Connection across the street at the food bank. They've been willing to partner with us very generously. They would need to fill the application out, provide the PG&E care program proof. If they do not have PG&E care program, they could also provide their income verification to the Resource Connection, and the Resource Connection could say, yes, they do meet the requirements, and we could still serve them even if they aren't PG&E customers. Every person must reapply each year. So this is not going to be a one-time application and then you're on it for good. We want to have some accountability and make sure that we're holding people accountable who may have income changes. And so they need to prove that they're still on the PG&E care program and apply each year. And the application period would be right before our budget. So between April 1st and May 31st, they would need to put the new application in. If the person did not reapply, then they would be eliminated from the program and would have to come back at the bottom of the list if they didn't reapply. If someone has a change in their income and they're suddenly making more money, it's their responsibility to notify us. If they do not notify us, we would immediately suspend their participation in the program. And if we do see that there was fraudulent activity and they were trying to deceive us, they would never have the opportunity to use the program again. So we want to make sure that we are only serving those who truly qualify and need the program. And if someone tries to defraud the district, we would back bill them from the time that their income took them above the qualification level. If someone gets locked off while they're on the program, then they would be suspended from the program for 12 months, and after that year period, they would have the opportunity to reapply for the program and continue. But the purpose of this program, in part, is to prevent lock-offs. We don't want to see people getting locked off while on this program. And if there are any disputes, the general manager would be given full discretion to resolve those disputes. And in terms of modifications, this program is 100% at the discretion of your board, and if you decide to change it or eliminate it at any time, you have the right to do that. And we clearly state that this is not a guaranteed benefit, so people cannot come and say, you promised that you would do this, you have to do it forever. It really depends on the board's will and also our financial ability to support the program. As for funding, and this is the main thing we need to get determined aside from the policy itself and making sure that language is dialed in. We are limited by Prop 218, and I know that we've gone over this. So just to remind you, we're not like PG&E where you can use all funds to do subsidy like this. We can only use
We're well
non-rate.
aware of all this, Joel.
Okay.
I hate to cut you off, but
No problem.
because of time. Yeah, we're aware of this, and I do have a number of comments that I'd like to make, because if we're looking at something that's in perpetuity, we don't know if Prop 218 is gonna stay. We don't know if it's gonna be modified to then allow us to be able to do that. So I would be very hesitant to include a language in here, you know, of a particular law right now that exists that may at some point, you know, be modified. So my recommendation is that the funding would be all allowable sources under law, and just leave the language at that. I think that provides a lot more, opportunities. And again, because there's always, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me like everyone's kind of continues to attack 218. Well, we can change it, we can modify it, it'll take a voter, but, that's one of my comments on this. And again, I apologize because of the time, but I thought we had talked about up to $60,000. Doesn't mean we have to go 60,000, but the annual cost, from what we were talking about was, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, up to 60,000, which would then bring, the 200 customers in at $20 and $30. Because right now it would be, it'd be I think right now the way that it's written is that it would only be 100 water and 100 sewer.
Right,
connections.
so we did include only one option in the policy, but again, this is a fluid policy, this is up to the board, so we, per the board's direction, we brought back the cost for the 100, 150, 150, and then 200 at the $60,000 level.
So this is
So
the option that you're
The
talking
funding
about.
3 is what I'm, what I think
Right.
is.
And I support the option 3 as well.
Right. I think also, this is something I'd like to see happen immediately, rather than wait until fiscal year of June, whenever. Let's start a program now. Doesn't mean we have to bring all 100 or 200 people in, but I'd like to see it happen immediately to show our customers who have taught, those folks that we've listened to show them that, we want to get something going, right now. And so those are the 3 things. 1 is start it immediately. 2 is the cost of option 3 there, not to exceed 60,000. And then, the funding source be reworded to where all legal or allowed under current law funding mechanisms for this program. Because again, what happens in 3 years or 4 years when they said, well, Prop 218 has been modified to allow for 5% of customer-generated funds to go
We're
into
already
a
there,
program like that.
And we're already there,
Yeah,
you're saying.
Yeah. So I just.
No, and the one thing we're talking about is having a sustainable, stable funding was the reason this last time it went away, and that makes sense. Have any non, or any funds available under law. I mean, there's no reason not to change that. If we're gonna limit it $60,000, limit it there, not where we can get it and which pot we're gonna move it around in or take it out of one year. And I do agree, this board gave very specific direction to staff months ago that we wanted to have this on our agenda by the end of the year. The purpose wasn't to punt it 6 months, to start 6 months down the road. It was to get it on the agenda at the end of the year and try and implement it as quickly as possible. And I'd like to see it implemented January 1st and not wait till June. And I agree with Terry, the 60,000 is what we were looking at. One other thing that I did see on there is the lock off. And we're trying to tackle this real quick. I know I'm going through these comments real quick, but the lock off, which is policy 21.3.4, the applicant's account must be in good standing.
Have to wait for a year?
Meaning the account is not currently locked off for non-payment, but the account should also be up to date. I don't know, do you have to wait to get the non-payment or to lock off? And, for lock off or non-payment, there's got to be, that would be I think a good eligibility rule that you got to have your account up to date to be able to, for us to be giving a discount on it.
And then also, just real quickly, I'd love to have the opportunity to have one more special board meeting to where we could adopt.
And I
Yes,
agree
ma'am.
with Terry. And I'd like to know if, are customers limited to how long they can be on it? Or are we saying no? If
The
they
policy
qualify?
does qualify, just say 1 year. 1 year, and then come
And they have to
January 1st
reapply.
or July 1st, whatever we adopt
Okay,
there,
so that the
they'd have to
same
reapply.
person can come, if the circumstances are the same, then they can be on it for
Yeah.
perpetuity.
Well, no,
Their
they'd have to.
Yeah, right.
They'd have to reapply.
Right.
Right.
But there should be something in here that if there's a waiting list at the end of the year, those people's opportunity comes first.
So
So so we're gonna go over the 200 sewer, 200 sewer, 200 water, we're with those 200 people, and we fill it up. that there are, that those, that we gave away the $60,000 in 2019 as of, during that year. That money's gone, so they gotta reapply starting in November 1st, say, of the following year. If we adopt it in if we go with, starting it immediately, that come November 1st, they have an opportunity to reapply. If there might be a waiting list from the previous year, the people that didn't get on, those people's applications should be seen first.
Okay,
Right.
here's,
That's an interesting process, or, program. Or do we say that if we have more than what we can handle, maybe they can only get one, water or sewer, but not both, so that gives more, I don't know.
If I may suggest, I do think that some folks who need this most may get on the first year and may become to depend on this, and it would be hard to take that away from them on year two. What if we see what the actual demand is from the customers and come back to the board and report, yes, we have 100 on the waiting list, or no, we didn't even fill up the existing program, and then maybe we could refine the policy at that time and say, okay, we're gonna only give it 1 year and then the waiting list comes first, or we'll continue with those customers, and if there's still room, then the next folks come in. But I would, some of these folks, I think, would become to depend on this.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that was a minor thing. The other, Terry's three things, I think,
Okay.
are bigger and
Okay.
I think need to be done.
okay,
So
so
you have
we're
those,
gonna go with
Joe?
January 1st of 2019?
That's the
Yeah.
Okay, then we better get started.
I think Jeff does have a few comments on the funding side.
Yeah, the question I would have is, can we actually implement it by January 1? So that's something Joel and Resource Connection can work on at this particular time, find out as soon as possible. Secondly, since there is no money currently in the budget, there will be a budget adjustment necessary to implement this program. And when you do a budget adjustment, you increase both expenditures and revenues. We will have to identify a revenue source. You just can't say increase revenues. And my thought process here is, as you're looking at all those revenues, we need a sustainable revenue source. And the only one that's really sustainable is the general property tax revenues that is not identified already. And so that would be my recommendation, is to focus on that, because that's sustainable. It will take away revenues for other things going forward, but if your board chooses to do this, it's my recommendation that we identify the general CCWD property taxes, not the improvement district property taxes, because that's by ordinance, we cannot use those.
Right.
So that would be my recommendation.
With Terry's suggestion that we, instead of identifying or trying to identify a funding source in the policy, instead of doing that, just put any funding source available under law?
I would do that, but right now, the only way I could fund it is to use property tax revenues.
Right, and that's what you.
Right, exactly,
right
exactly.
now.
Yeah.
In 10 years, that may be different.
It may be
and you-
different.
And you may want to have the flexibility of using that new revenue that came in year 8, and now you got your hands tied. That's the only reason I'm suggesting not tying it to a specific, even though
Yeah.
it all one backfills the other.
Actually, there's restrictions, but I hear what you're saying, and I think what we could, Matt and I were talking, we can rewrite this to do all allowable revenues, and in this particular case, you could say until further funding becomes available, we're going to be focusing on property taxes, but when other revenues come available, we will be able to use that. But it is less restricted to the split between water and sewer, because we have to fund this equally. From the sewer fund has to fund sewer credits, the water fund has to fund the water credits.
Okay. No, and I also, I don't want to take away the possibility of a $50 credit from somebody who has both water and sewer. Those are the people that are suffering the worst. If they're at the poverty level and they get that sewer bill and the water bill, those are the ones that need the most help.
Certainly.
Can I
Yeah.
jump in here? What you just said is true, but that family or that person would certainly be in difficulty, so it may be impossible for them to get their current bill current, or their present, get a zero balance on their account. That's why they're here applying. So you've raised the possibility of having an unrealistic threshold that they can't get across.
No, that's hard to say.
When I say the lock, not only the lock off, but account being up to date?
Yeah.
Okay, and that was just something I threw in there that, and that's not an absolute, that is something that I need.
Okay, and the other comment, you gotta go, I know, but first come, first serve basis. Talk to the Resource Connection to see if they analyze those applications to see if a person has suddenly become on disability. You know, this is, you know, their need is acute and possibly would be improved, but they've had an unforeseen circumstance.
We're going to be able to continue talking about this item, but we do have to, before Terry walks out the door, we do want to set a special meeting for the opportunity to adopt this before he leaves the district, which will be on December 7th. His seat will be, Cindy Zaccato will be taking his seat at that time. So we're looking at, and we might go back, I might recommend that we go back to a couple of the special meeting that we had scheduled for Tuesday, November 20th, that we canceled, or at the beginning of this meeting. We may want to, if that works, that won't work for you.
No, well, not. The other thing is you have made several recommendations on changes in policy, and we can bring back that policy to the Finance Committee for your review, that we captured everything, and that's on Monday, November 19th. And that's a quick turnaround. I understand that, and Joel will have to have this done by tomorrow to get it posted. But
I
then
thought
it gives us
this
a final
afternoon, Joel.
review, and then your recommendation can take it to maybe December 5th.
Okay.
That was sometime that first week in December for approval. Does that work?
Yeah, and that's what-
I'll make sure it works.
That's what Russ just recommended to me here, is December 5th as well, and that does work for you,
Yes, sir.
for Bertha?
Nothing on my calendar. Okay.
Okay, I do have a medical appointment that day, but I can change that.
What time?
It's at 3 PM in Sonora.
Uh,
But if we meet here at 1 for one item?
Correct.
I don't have to do anything. Okay.
Could we meet earlier than 1?
Cindy wouldn't like that.
Does she take office
No,
then?
Oh,
she
no,
doesn't
she
take
won't be there.
office.
You'll be, that's the
Yeah,
reason you'll be
yeah.
here. Okay, let's say, how about 12:30? 12:30 instead of 1 o'clock?
That's earlier, Terry. Yeah. Oh, yes, God.
Okay, 11.
Yeah.
11.
Well, actually,
This is meetings all for Terry anyway, so if he wants to meet at
Mr.
11
President?
o'clock on December 5th.
You can choose whatever time, but
Okay, 11
Mr.
a.m.?
But
11?
remember, this is just one item.
11 a.m.
Right. And if special meeting, if we have any other items to put on there, we can do that too. But we have a meeting the following week as well.
Correct.
Our only meeting in December will be on December 12th.
Okay,
Okay, 11 a.m.
Okay.
Thank you. And again, I'm really sorry, but it just kind of how the stars are lining up today. Thank you for letting me interrupt you, Joel.
No,
I'm
no
sorry,
problem. No problem.
Okay.
Thank you,
fellow
Joel.
We're no longer on a time constraint. I think we've accomplished everything, so.
Okay, then let's take a break.
Sorry, Pat, I'm gonna miss your presentation.
So Russ, you wanted to speak. You have a lot of questions.
I don't have any more questions. I'm fine.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're good. Do we have enough direction?
I don't think there's anything else that I need, Jeff. Is there anything else you need?
Other than to get to work?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I think we do have, unless there's public comment on this?
We do have public comment, but we're waiting for the presentation to be completed. And Mr.
Russ?
Thomas, we'll have something else to say. I know we
We'll have
will.
something else to say. So this will just be handled as a credit on the account, so there's no voucher system that they're gonna issue over there? How will the
No.
communication take place?
We actually are slightly rethinking how the application process is going to work, because what the board said is all we really need is PG&E care participation and a valid application. And so based on that, the Resource Connection would get that, and then they would stack the applications up and then give them to us, and then we would verify, are they the customer, is the owner, has they signed off, things of that nature. So what we're thinking is, unless there is additional income verification needed, such as they don't have the care program proof, we will handle the applications, potentially through customer service directly and receive them here. And then anyone who needs to have a additional income verification, we'll send that small number of customers to Resource Connection and they will handle that. But what we've done is made it very simple and straightforward, so we've minimized those administrative duties that would have otherwise been necessary.
And have we looked at our accounting system, our billing system, our software to close enough to see that we can accommodate so we're not having to do a manual deduction each month?
So IT knows that we can do this manually. What they're looking for, what John is looking for, is a way to automate it. And so this customer will continue to have the credit automatically applied until we go in and turn that off, or say we want it automated for a year up until the reapply date, and then everyone gets cut off unless we extend that. And so between now and, I'm not sure about now in the Finance Committee, but certainly now and final adoption, we will bring that information back to the board. But we can do it.
Okay.
And just to follow up on that, with this quick turnaround, it may be a very manual process at the beginning until we're able to automate it. But we will do everything we can to start it on January 1, and that's where the procedures and the processes are going to have to really accelerate. And so in that regards, there may be more manual than automated in the beginning, but the goal is to become automated.
Okay, thank you. In light of this, it looks like it's going to be adopted. It certainly has support of these 4 board members. Should we start with some sort of a public outreach, some sort of a way of reaching our customers, saying this application is coming, or get it out to them ASAP so that they create an application and create the process and get that before, we can't do that before not before we adopt it? Okay.
So, Mr. President, we can start to do some things internally and start thinking about those things, but as Matt said, we wouldn't want to have anything go public until the board has taken final action and we had the policy set in stone. But we can do that legwork in advance, and we could even bring more of those ideas to the board in December if that would be what the board would like to see.
And I don't think we have to worry about not having sufficient applicants. We just have to, again, do outreach, and they're going to come like that, and out of necessity. I don't see a problem.
Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay.
One public that we have.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Joel.
Appreciate it.
Joel.
Okay, we're back to our scrambled agenda. Peter Martin and Pat McGreevy have left the room.
No. Aren't
So
we-
let's go
no,
to
aren't we
let's go to 4D.
Yeah.
Robbie Creamer, discussion action on Division 5, Valley Springs Declaration of Surplus Property.
Good afternoon, President Ratterman, board members. This item is a request, well, discussion and request to surplus a property that is part of the Huckleberry Lift Station. There are 3 lots there. Originally was 6 or 7 lots. A number of them early on were surplused and sold. We see, after a great deal of examination of this and what we're going to do to the lift station, no need for this lot. It's approximately half an acre. And I don't even really have anything to show you. The map that went with it, it's pretty straightforward. It's 105 by almost 200 lot. It's right at half an acre. And we'd like to surplus it, run it through the standard process. And if another agency is not interested in it, then sell it. Are there any questions?
Nope. I think we're familiar with this property.
I like presenting these documents.
Okay,
You've presented them so well in the past, and you've prepped us so well that there's no questions when it
But-
comes to this point.
Director Thomas has a
no,
question.
I just
Of course he does.
wanted to make a motion, but I don't know whether you wanted me to make a motion before you ask for public comment or?
Go ahead.
Okay. I would like to move a resolution of the Board of Directors declaring this property with APN number 074-008-001. We should surplus this for district use, or to district use. Okay?
Second?
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any public comment? Rebecca, will you take roll?
Director Thomas.
Yes.
Director Underhill.
Yes.
President Ryder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie. Good job. That was the quickest item of the day. You win something.
I could have taken longer.
Okay, we're going to go to workshop 5A, update on local forest management initiatives. This is Peter Martin, our manager of water resources, coupled with Pat McGreevy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just spoke with Pat McGreevy, and he has offered to come back to our next meeting on December 12th, since his presentation could go pretty long, and I know we're running short on time here. So I just wanted to offer that as an option. I just wanted to know what the pleasure of the board is to whether or not we
Okay.
can go forward.
Let us confer.
Okay.
What does our December 12th agenda look like?
At this particular point in time, election of officers, some debt issues and talking, but I think that we could pull this into that process without a problem.
Now, did you say death or
Debt.
debt?
Debt issues.
Dead issues.
Debt.
See?
I thought,
That's okay.
and we'll be, and maybe, okay, and then we've just added maybe something to that agenda.
That was for December 5th.
Yeah.
Okay, everything will be taken care of on December 5th on that item? Okay. All right.
Cool.
That, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
If that
Perfect.
suits you, Pat.
December 12th. It's the second, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mr. McGreevy. Appreciate,
Pat.
Pat has to run anyway.
We'll
so
give you
thank
your,
what's that?
Pat did have to run to another thing,
Oh,
so I
okay,
appreciate it.
okay. Punt, we punted that. Okay, general manager's report. Jeff, anything?
I have two items.
Okay.
The first one is at the November 7th State Water Resource Control Board meeting, the board decided to delay a vote on implementing the flow measures for the San Joaquin River tributaries until a later meeting. They implied the December meeting. This was at the request from feedback from Department of Fish and Wildlife staff and a recent letter from Governor Brown and Governor-elect Gavin Newsom. So we will be providing you more information. It could actually be the same date as our own board meeting. The other item, and I know he's been waiting patiently, is the introduction of Damon Wyckoff, our new Director of Operations, who started November 5th.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'd like you to come on up and introduce yourself. And actually, it's a welcome back because Damon started his career here, I do believe.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Good afternoon, President Ratterman, directors. Almost 13 years ago, I was hired here as a Jenny Lind water treatment plant operator. So I worked here for a short time before transitioning over to the Amador Water Agency. So for the last almost 13 years, I worked my way up through the ranks at the water agency, and for the last 5, I was the operations manager there. So I was responsible for water, wastewater, distribution collections, and engineering for about 3 of those 5 years. So I'm in the cockpit, I'm shooting up to altitude, I'm getting inundated with all kinds of good, beneficial information. Fascinating district, happy to be here, excited to get rolling. Incidentally, I have one update to provide to everybody. Let me see if I can get my notes here collected. There was can you help me with the name of that?
Mr. Beatles.
Mr. Beatles on Baldwin Street had approached the board regarding a service line issue out in front of his property. I just want to let everybody know that repair has been completed. What we're waiting for now out in the field is for the trench line to dry out, and then we can actually get in there with some equipment. We've run a high line jumper, essentially a water line above ground to eliminate the leaking pipe. And then what we have to do now is wait for the water to basically dry so we can get some equipment on that property to then dig a trench, put it back in the ground and get moving forward on that. So I'm continually understanding the challenges associated with all the different areas within the district, and discussing at length and at depth with all staff about opportunities moving forward and where we can make some changes and some improvements, and just really kind of meet the objectives and the needs of the ratepayers.
Was this the fellow from Valley Springs who came to address the board?
That's correct.
Okay, that,
Yep.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's good. That was
Yeah,
great
good
for
to
me.
hear.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was
Well,
good.
welcome back. I didn't know.
Yeah, appreciate it very much.
Oh, good. Look forward to hearing more from you on what's going on out there.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
remember the first day he was on the job was when the tank went in
Yeah.
Valley Springs?
Yes. You know, so I was a treatment operator for a long time, so I can relate to the heart-thumping terror that happens when you see a tank about to go dry. And, you know, so it was kind of, you know, like a drive in a car that I used to own. Yeah.
Oh, great. Welcome.
Thank you, guys.
to
Thank
Oh,
you
no,
very much.
thank you,
Welcome.
Damon.
All right.
Welcome.
That's all I have, other than we are so happy Damon is here.
Yes.
And he's already showed his work and his ability to get things done within the first week.
No, that's, I've heard nothing but good about him. I anticipated his arrival. Thanks for being here, Damon. Good job.
Yeah, thanks, I appreciate it, and if I can say one other thing, I look forward to having the opportunity to inform the board a little, in depth on different issues and situations in order to kind of achieve some effective resolution for some of the issues that we face.
Oh, that's wonderful.
All right.
Yeah,
Look forward to hearing from you.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jeff. Board reports. Russ, let's start with you in the middle here.
Well, I used to work here too. And now I'm back, looks like. So. And I'm very pleased about that. I hope that all of you board members are as pleased as I am.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, it's good to know what I'm going to be doing for the next 4 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We had talked about some people coming before the board and asking for help. We had what I thought was a very wonderful and thoughtful presentation by some people in the building industry about changing our rate structure on residential meters. That was, I thought, supposed to come back to the engineering committee for further discussion and then bring it back to the board. I understand that there are budget considerations because we've had rate structures that we've adopted based on a certain amount of money being generated for meters at a certain rate. But there are, I can't help have the very strong feeling that there are other agencies that are dealing with or have dealt with the same issue in the recent past, that we don't really need to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. You know, let's just recognize that there's a way around this that's not going to be detrimental to the district without charging 3 or 4 times what a larger meter would cost under normal circumstances. Whenever you're I don't want to beat this to death, but this is a circumstances that hopefully will never occur, that you'd have a fire. But the meter needs to be there in such a capacity to operate the state mandated sprinkler system that, you know, we didn't make the rule on that. But let's get it on the agenda, if not for the 12th or some future agenda, not too far down the road, please.
I will talk to Charles when he returns about placing it on the next engineering committee agenda, so we can bring that back and have further discussion and bring it to the full board.
Thank you.
Certainly.
This is the 5/8 versus the 1-inch.
Yeah, or a 3/4. I mean,
Yeah.
there was evidence that a 3/4 would work and has worked in other places. But.
Thank you, Director Thomas. Director Underhill.
Oh, yes. Okay, just wanted to report that the dam, I believe I had reported about the dam at White Pines being full of graffiti. and I brought pictures in, and Joel probably shared what happened. The dam has been painted. There is one more spot that you need a ladder, and they didn't have a ladder to take care of. And so here's the bill for that, for the paint. If I can give that to someone, we can take care of that, and thank goodness we didn't have to pay for the labor.
They put graffiti on the dam?
It was completely, yeah, you can take a look at the
Is that,
pictures.
is that
Yeah,
because of the cattails that Joel removed?
that I removed, yeah, that was in retaliation. Okay, I received, here was a tab into the San Francisco Chronicle Best Lawyers, and guess who's in there? Downey Brand. Do you ever see this? Yeah. Oh, you.
They write it.
Oh, I thought it was great. Would anybody else like to see it? Well, okay.
I should have left that one.
One of the things that helped me when I was elected originally was the organization chart of CCWD. You know, shows the different departments, and it does show the personnel attached to that, you know, assigned to that department. And so I was thinking of Cindy coming on board, you know, and that would help her. So maybe after, since we're gonna be getting a new general manager and we have some personnel changes, maybe we can update that and have it out. Yeah, that one, cause that's outdated.
It is outdated a little.
Yeah, yeah,
Couple people.
So, okay. That's it?
Okay, couple quick things on, we've talked about the regulating reservoir earlier today. It reminded me of a tour that I took recently at Camera. And one of the things that I saw was I mean, it's open to the public. You pull right off the road, there's a little parking lot, and you can walk right up to it. There was a barbed wire fence that's been taken down. And I think just for liability reasons, and I don't know how often that has to be put back up, or how often it's taken down. I'm gonna guess it's for swimming and fishing and easy access to it. But it also, see, if there's ever an accident, an incident there, I think the ability, or if there could be shown that there's a lack of effort or a lack of trying to keep it secure. I mean, if someone were to drown, as sad as that might be, it would be a lawsuit for us, no matter what, because it occurred on our property. And I think the exposure would be lessened if we took further steps to try and secure easy access to that reservoir. And I don't know I don't know how often that's done, or maybe there might be a more secure, but all that's there right now is that the barbed wire fence is still there. It's just laying on the ground. The barbed wire still go across the pathway, but that's as much as it is. Anyway, just I was serious about having a reservoir that we use all the time. It's on maps, and calling it the regulating reservoir, and having no name for it. The no name reservoir is what we should at least call it, the no name reservoir. But we should come up with something, and this isn't a big deal, but just what the heck.
Have a contest.
Yeah, I mean, have a contest with staff that know about it, and see what we might be able to come up with. But that's calling it the
Strange reservoir.
What's that?
The strange reservoir.
The Martin Reservoir, the Martin Metzger Reservoir. It doesn't matter. There was 2 Jeff Myers in the room today. We could call it the Jeff Meyer Reservoir. But anyway, that's just the regulating reservoir. I do want to reiterate that we do have a special meeting on the 5th, and we also have our Finance Committee meeting will be on Monday the 19th, coming up here. The special meeting on the 5th, and our next board meeting will be on Wednesday, December 12th. And Mountain County Water Resource Agency has a meeting. Our meeting will be this Friday, October 16th. It's going to be up in Auburn. That's all I have We're going into closed session for a couple items. Couple hours.
What is the Mountain Counties? or
Mountain
is-
County's
is-
meeting will be
Is
at,
it executive board?
no, it's just the whole board meets every other month. And we're going to be
Oh.
meeting in Auburn. We rotate the meeting around, and it'll be in Auburn on that day.
Oh, okay.
It's a board, just a board meeting.
Uh-huh, that's, okay.
Okay, going into closed session, item 10A, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. Thanks, Damon. 10B, conference with real property negotiators, and 10C, conference with legal counsel, potential litigation. Any public comment before we go into closed session? Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we're gonna have to go in there, since that's Joel's office now.
Yeah, Joel stole our meeting room.
Joel, where did you move us?